Okay. Thank you, Sergeant. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I'd like to welcome to City Hall. I've been joined by the Honorable Council Members Mr. Englander and Jose Huizar. This is the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, February 28th. As you can see, we have a packed house. We do have several items in today's agenda. My understanding is that out of courtesy to Councilman Rosendahl, we would take up his item when he gets here. What I'd like to do is proceed through the agenda and try to move on items and offer him the courtesy of addressing the item as soon as it's timely, given the position will be in our respective reports. So that being said, we do have public comment. I would ask you to keep your eye on the clock. I know many of you have written very eloquent letters, but you do have 2 minutes. So if you can get to your point to make sure we listen to what is important in your message. You might find yourself that the previous speaker and or speakers might have already stated what you felt was important, and it's okay to say, I agree with the previous speaker, and give us something different, so that we don't hear the same thing over and over and over again. And that would help facilitate this hearing. So, going through this agenda, we do see that items 1 and 2 do not have public comment cards. So, item 2, if my colleagues agree, we can approve and have the city attorney prepare the ordinance on item 2. Are we comfortable with that?
Councilman, that it's already been prepared, so
Okay.
you're approving the city attorney prepare one.
So the ordinance itself.
Yes.
Okay, we'll call that special. Okay. Okay, it's a quick question. Well, let's go to item 2 then. Yes.
Thank you. On item 2, my question this really pertains to some clarity on the mixed commercial residential use developments on the findings, which is in section 5, number 1. I wanted some more clarity on that as it refers to item A, that the project is consistent and implements the affordable housing provisions of the general plan's housing element. And so since this is a sweeping citywide effect, the question is that implementing those elements and findings in all mixed commercial residential use developments moving forward, or only those with housing provisions for affordable? And can you give me some clarity on that?
Tom Roth from the Planning Department. Could you please repeat what section you were referring to?
So in section page 4, under section 5, conditional use permit, area planning commission with
Right.
okay, and then under that, number 1, findings, section A.
Right. Yeah, that's an existing finding for the conditional use permit for these large mixed-use projects. Then we've just streamlined the existing finding to make it a little more clear that it's got to be consistent with the affordable housing provisions of the general plan and the housing element. So any project that comes in that wants to get that needs a conditional use, that goes to the Area Planning Commission, must meet all of those findings, A through G.
So, but my question then was, is that the implementation of that, is that for affordable housing provisions only if that CUP is going to have an affordable housing component, or then therefore all mixed commercial residential use developments shall then implement an affordable housing component? And that's what the clarity I was looking for. Is that?
If they are seeking that conditional use permit, they must be in compliance with the affordable housing component of the housing element. So yes, your answer is if they're seeking that conditional use permit, they must comply with that. Is that answering your question?
It does, and therefore, and we still have an opportunity. This is going to come back to council,
Right.
so I can
This
address
has already
it.
been approved through Plum. It's been approved. It was approved last May. and it's been finalized by the city attorney, so this is just going to go to full council.
Yeah,
for
the
adoption.
ordinance will. So can I ask for just information on a report back on that before council when it comes?
And again,
on
this is
that
not
particular-
changing any existing regulation.
Right.
This is something that's already there.
I understand that.
Okay,
Okay,
sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Fine.
Okay.
Councilman?
Thank you.
Okay, so it's been moved to approve the ordinance as prepared by the city attorney, and we'll have this referred to council.
With
That's
the,
full committee.
with the information requested by Councilman Englander.
Yes. Okay. Roberto, let's jump to item 5, seeing there's no cards there.
Okay, item 5, council members, is an appeal by Nancy and John Rainick. They're representatives of the Ranpao Neighborhood Council, and they're basically appealing the decision of the Central APC as it relates to the approval of a track map for a 12-unit condo project in CD4.
My understanding that a letter has been submitted by the appellant to withdraw the appeal, and we can move in the direction we can deny the appeal.
Correct.
See no cards. That'd be the action of this committee. Okay. So that'll be our action?
The appeal will be denied.
Yes. So that takes care of 2 and 5. Let's jump to item number 1 for a presentation on item number 1.
Yes, council members, item 1 is a planning department report. There's also an LAHD report on file. It's a report, it's in response to a motion of Wesson Reyes relative to the transfer of land use authorities from the CRA.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Ken Bernstein with the Department of City Planning. We were before you 2 weeks ago to discuss the issues surrounding the transition of land use authority from the Community Redevelopment Agency. As you know, the Redevelopment Agency, as we know it, ceased to exist as of February 1st. It is now a designated local authority of the city under a new 3-member board under the jurisdiction of the state. And while the council has already taken action to choose not to become the successor agency to the CRA-LA, there is considerable uncertainty remaining as to what the potential land use impacts of the CRA-LA's dissolution will be. We have provided a transmittal that is responding to a council motion, Wesson Reyes motion, instructing the planning department to prepare an ordinance to transfer or preserve the land use power specifically of the CRA through policy adopted by the city. Wanted to briefly run through the policy options and the issues that are before you with respect to these land use transitions. First of all, it's important to understand that while the state legislation, AB 26, dissolved redevelopment agencies, it is our working assumption that the state law did not abolish the 31 existing redevelopment project areas or the redevelopment plans. As a result, these plans continue to exist as expressions of public policy, and many of these plans have specific provisions related to land use. We have been working very closely with the CRA-LA staff. We have created a land use working group to work through and develop for you recommendations on this transition. We laid out a few categories of potential impacts that do require action and direction from the council. One of the most important is the redevelopment plan land use provisions specifically, that these redevelopment plans typically have specified that permits cannot be issued without a sign-off that ensures that development proposals in these areas are consistent with the plans. And this has provided everything from review of commercial corridors in South Los Angeles, design review in downtown, design review in Pico Union and North Hollywood. We are also working with CRA-LA staff to clean up the hundreds of references to redevelopment and redevelopment plans in the zoning code. And then finally, the redevelopment plans have provisions and CRA provisions to maximize development rights, maximize property rights, and oversight is needed to ensure that there's a legal mechanism, in many cases, to lift limitations that would limit density and allow applicants to take advantage of their full development rights with redevelopment agency approval. So those are the major areas of impact. We have put before you in a transmittal for today three transition scenarios. A first that would clean up the zoning code references, limited transition ordinance. This is not something that would have a fiscal impact, but is something that could be pursued immediately by our staff through our code studies section. That does not address the broader redevelopment plan regulations. The second area of direction would be to develop an ordinance to incorporate all redevelopment plan land use permit approval and shift authority for implementing land use review from the CRA-LA to the Director of Planning. This is something that would have a significant fiscal impact because all permit review currently conducted by CRA-LA would be coming to the Department of City Planning. And then finally, a more long-term approach would be to adopt transition ordinances for redevelopment plan areas. We've begun doing this as plan areas have expired, but to integrate our land use regulatory controls into our overlay specific plans and code regulations. We would do this as we update community plans and tackle some of our long-range planning program in the city. So just to conclude, it is our recommendation that the council consider centralizing all land use plans into the Department of City Planning. There is an opportunity here to streamline the development process and the review process and to ensure that there is a single point of contact for all land use approval. There has also been expressions by the new governing board of the CRA-LA, the designated local authority, at their last meeting on February 16th, and those board members did express support for centralizing review functions in the Department of City Planning. And we have presented to you in our transmittal a proposed staffing package which was developed in consultation with CRA-LA staff looking at their current staffing strictly for the redevelopment land use provisions. CRA-LA has a staff of about 190 currently. They have received notices, their pink slips for a 120-day notice. Most of them will no longer be employed by CRA-LA as of June. And we are looking at a package of 11 staff positions that would be required to oversee those 31 redevelopment plans and the day-to-day permit activity and planning reviews within those 31 project areas. And that is potential of funding that through a small percentage of the essentially windfall that is coming back to the city from the redistribution of tax increment revenue to the various taxing entities, including the city. It is a small percentage of existing CRA staff as well as the funds that are coming back to the city. So that is what's before you, and the Planning Department also requests that should the council endorse this direction and want to move in this direction of a transition of land use authority, that not become effective, of course, until the associated funding and staffing were provided concurrently. And that concludes my report.
By sheer nature of the qualified areas where a CRA project does exist, you do have higher levels of poverty, higher levels of density, and challenges that essentially speak to the notion of economic development and job creation, correct?
Correct. These 31 areas have rates of poverty much higher than the citywide rate, and they are, in fact, the most economically disadvantaged communities in the city. And as a result, these have been areas, because the CRA has had their planning authority in place with these redevelopment plans and project areas, our Department of City Planning has not always had its own plans and overlays and land use regulations.
That's another level of issues.
Right.
Very important to the personnel involved, very important to the projects and the legal agreements given, assumptions and assertions with different contracts and legal binding documents, but also the area in of itself requires this level of support given the conditions you described. Okay.
Exactly.
Any questions from my colleagues before we go into public comment?
My only quick question is on the financial part of it, that there's an anticipated, I believe, general tax increment for fiscal year 12-13 of roughly 18 million and 13-14 for 20 million. Is that correct?
Correct. This is from a CAO-CLA report from last month.
Okay, so on the 11 position authorities, which would come out of the general fund, the estimated rough $1 million for those
Correct.
11, would that item then go on to budget and finance and or personnel?
Yes, if there's direction on the policy direction
right.
from this committee, certainly would be our understanding that budget and finance and personnel would address the funding and staffing.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Huizar, any questions? Okay, so let's go into the public comment. Thank you, sir. I'd like to call up Mr. Bill Rochen, who is the president of the planning committee, and then we have Flora Chow, and then we'll have Laura Myers. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Council Member. Thank you. My name is Bill Rochen, President of the LA City Planning Commission. This is the first time in 7 years that I've come before you, and I come here because of the importance of the issue. So I want to thank you for hearing me. I think I have 3 simple points to make, which I'm sure you'll hear again. The first is, if we would not find a successful way to transfer these plans and their responsibilities, there would be a planning vacuum. Over the years, the effort has been from planning is not to focus on these areas where the CRA has been involved. If those plans would cease to function successfully, I think those neighborhoods would be vulnerable. I think this would be a major loss in protection around those neighborhoods. My second point is about uncertainty. The uncertainty that we would face not only in these neighborhoods if the plans are not substantiated and continued, but the uncertainty in our development community. That the development community depends on this at this time of great, I think, economic stress. It's really important that we're able to, I think, give that kind of confidence to both the neighborhoods and the development community. I would say there is a silver lining here, which is that as we focus and reduce to one planning agency rather than 2, that there's a not only an efficiency there along with streamlining, but I think there's an elevation of what the role of planning is in our city. And I think to make that focus is a really important and significant place to start. I would greatly encourage you to look to the funding and support this effort. I think it's a very thoughtful recommendation from the City Planning Department, and thank you for hearing it.
Thank you, Mr. Rochen, for your hard work in the committees around the commission. Thank you so much. Flora Chow.
Good afternoon. I'm Flora Chu, Preservation Advocate for the Los Angeles Conservancy. I want to begin by thanking you for taking up this issue and looking at strategies for addressing the potential loss of important planning that has been done through the CRA-LA. CRA-LA has not only played a key role in more than 50 projects throughout the city that preserve significant historic places, but it has also provided a critical level of protection for historic communities through the land use and permit review that implements the CRA redevelopment plans. These reviews have allowed many of the planned areas, like the historic core in downtown, Hollywood, Pico Union, and Wilshire Center in Koreatown, to retain their essential character while accommodating new investment and compatible infill development. The Conservancy supports the shift of this land use review authority to the Planning Department, specifically through scenario number 2, and urges the City Council to allocate the necessary resources that will ensure continued protection of these neighborhoods in the absence of CRA-LA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. Laura Myers.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Myers. I'm representing the North University Park Community Association today. It's one of the several stakeholder organizations in historic West Adams that's interested in this issue. NUPCA has sat as an advisor on one of the project area committees for 30 years. These are like specific plans, essentially. The redevelopment plans are specific plans. 100% of the redevelopment plans in South LA and many more throughout the city have a historic preservation component that's a part of the specific plan or redevelopment plan, and the planners need to do permit review. It's not surprising. It's not just that the poorest people live in these areas. These are the oldest areas of Los Angeles. So the city actually entered into an agreement as a legal settlement back in 1985 with HUD to have historic review of buildings, and that's part of what needs to be retained when we transfer the funds. So the funds and the people to do this thing. So we are in support of the Planning Department's recommendation number 2, that you have 11 staff members, including 1 who would be devoted to the historic preservation review. It's also my experience sitting on a project area which is former Hoover, now University Expo, and I don't know if I'm still on it or not, because I don't know if it still exists or not as a redevelopment plan. But the commercial corridors, without this kind of overlapping staff, we're going to have a little bit of a trouble. The Figueroa corridor, for example, CRA did not amend its plan to match the general plan amendment upping the FAR for the Figueroa Flower Corridor, and we're still making decisions on a case-by-case basis. On Washington Boulevard in the Mid-City corridors, happens to be where I live, they aren't allowed to do housing by right on parcels the CRA currently owns, and part of the idea is to do mixed use, both commercial and housing, affordable housing probably, to enliven our corridors, put eyes on the street and pedestrian activity. If we don't transfer all of it, we don't have that kind of control.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Thank you very much. And that does conclude public comment on this item. Colleagues, there are several questions that we need to, I believe, address with the Planning Department and City Attorney, and I'd like to hold this item for, at a minimum, another week, no longer than 3 weeks. Try to get it back to this committee as soon as possible. The clock is ticking. We do have personnel that has only a certain window that we need to address, and many significant issues. So I'd like to hold this for perhaps a week, no longer than 3, and bring this back as soon as possible to address these concerns. Yes.
My only question on that, and I agree with that, is on the positions that also have to go to in the budget requirements to 2 different committees. Would it be the wish of this committee to send just that part back so we can operate on dual tracks, or is it too premature to move forward with the other 2 committees?
Well, a part of the challenge here is understanding what is out there, and I think that's one of the key factors. Is the work is voluminous. I don't believe we've had the ability to drill down to a point where we can say how much goes to which committee, because there's so much work that has yet to be addressed. And so if you feel we can break it apart so we can send that element to budget, I'd like to hear your advice. But my understanding is that we have still yet to detangle much of the issues.
Well, again, Ken Bernstein with Department of City Planning. There are numerous issues with regard to redevelopment transition. There are economic development questions. There are housing issues. We are taking this narrow slice of land use issues specifically in the Land Use Authority. And while we are seeking the policy direction from this committee, we think that the questions are narrow enough that, and we know enough at this point about what the responsibilities would be if that transition occurred, that the item could be referred to Budget and Finance and Personnel, perhaps just to keep this moving forward, recognizing that the entire transition would need to be effectuated by June.
And perhaps that would be the most efficient approach, that we allow for a dual track so that Budget and Finance Committee could have its necessary due diligence in analyzing these issues. Councilmember, what's that?
Yes, thank you. So this is not the last time we hear of need to provide personnel to effectuate some responsibility that the CRA had previously. But in this instance, since it's just for the land use controls that the CRA had created for itself, there's really little to no chance that the dollar amount or the personnel needs are going to change once you get those answers to those additional questions on this and it comes back to us, correct?
I think that's unlikely. I think there are some legal questions that we are coordinating closely on with the Office of the City Attorney, which are some basic issues, and certainly their report and our coordination with them, we would bring all of that back to you. But in terms of assuming our current assumptions are correct on the legal framework and with the work that we've done in coordination with CRA-LA staff, we don't think that the scope of the work, the scope of the responsibilities would change based on new information.
Madam Attorney, any input or observations?
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. I think they're separate. I mean, we're still looking at the legal issues, and we'll report back. But if this committee wants to refer it, I don't see any reason why you can't do so at this point.
Okay, so if we refer to policy, we can have personnel and budget and finance committees to consider 11 position authorities requested at the estimated cost of $1,048,674 to the general fund and request to see a report. That way we can also regroup with planning staff and the city attorney on another track.
And that would be policy option number 2.
Policy option number 2. So, I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. So that'll be the action of this committee, will be policy option number 2. And we will regroup as well to look at the other assumptions on land use alone.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. That does take care of items number 1 and 2. I apologize, folks, I'm hopping around to get to the path of least resistance. I'm waiting for Councilman Rosendahl, so we'll keep moving down through the agenda. I don't see Councilman Rosendahl yet. So, Roberto, where does that take us?
That would be item 3, which is a planning department report and an LAHD report relative to the Nexus study for the USC specific plan.
Can you have the staff come on up? And please introduce yourselves.
Shauna Bonson, City Planning Department. We just have a brief presentation on the housing affordability addendum to the Nexus study relevant to the USC specific plan and development agreement. Planning staff is going to give a brief update on where we are with the public process in terms of that project, and then planning staff is going to give a summary on the market rate housing analysis, and then housing department staff is going to summarize the affordable housing analysis within the study area.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Michelle Levy with the City Planning Department. We're here today to present an analysis of housing affordability in the Nexus study area in conjunction with the Los Angeles Housing Department. The Nexus study was completed and was made publicly available in July of last year. Subsequent to the August 2nd Plum Committee meeting, and in response to public comments, the Planning Department has prepared a separate analysis on market rate housing affordability in the Nexus study area. As you know, the purpose of the Nexus study is to inform the development agreement, which is being prepared as part of the project. Planning staff continues to work on the draft specific plan and development agreement and has been reaching out to stakeholders. 2 public meetings were held on January 12th and 17th to seek input on the preliminary specific plan and DA concepts. These meetings had over 200 in attendance. Then on February 8th, preliminary drafts of the specific plan and development agreement were shared with stakeholders from the project's interest list. And in collaboration with SAGE, an outreach meeting was held as recently as February 15th to give interested stakeholders an opportunity to provide input on the drafts that were available and to answer any questions that they had about the content of the materials in advance of the official public hearings, which are scheduled for March 14th and 15th. The draft development agreement was prepared in collaboration with Council Districts 1, 8, and 9, and stems from our initial public outreach, which consisted of outreach to numerous focus groups, including SAGE and Esperanza. Planning staff continues to refine the development agreement. At this stage, the development agreement does have provisions for a housing revolving loan fund, and this is to rehabilitate existing housing units. There's no action before you today. This is simply a report back. We're here today to continue the public dialogue around housing affordability issues in the study area, and I'll turn it over to Debbie Lawrence to present the market rate housing affordability analysis. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Debbie Lawrence, Department of City Planning. The goal of our analysis was to address the affordability of rental housing for residents located in the Nexus study area. We looked at the key characteristics that determine a household's ability to afford rental housing, and this included annual household income, average household size, and the gross rent paid. We then compared these to established affordable income and maximum rent standards for LA County during 2011. So our analysis went beyond the Nexus study by first looking at the economic status of the households by each individual census tract in the 20 census tracts that comprise the Nexus study area. And secondly, we surveyed the asking rents in the Nexus study area using various rental websites. So I'm just going to give a couple of the highlights from the report. The median annual household income for all the census tracts is within the extremely low and very low income categories for a four-person household. These standards are about $25,600 for an extremely low income household and $42,700 for a very low income household. And the median income in the census tracts ranged from about $8,400 to $33,000. So we then looked at asking rents in the Nexus study area in late 2011, and we used a sample taken off of various rental websites, and we had about 137 units. And the range of asking rents was from a low of $600 for a studio all the way up to $6,000 for a six-bedroom. So the overall average was about $1,700, and a two-bedroom average was about $1,500. So according to the income standards, extremely low-income four-person households can afford rents of no more than $518 per month, and very low-income households can afford rents of no more than $864 per month. So if you look at the final piece that we did was we looked at what your annual income would have to be based on a 30% percentage. In other words, that your costs of rent and utilities should not exceed 30% of your income. And in order to afford a two-bedroom unit at $1,500, you'd need an annual income of at least $60,000. So it's important to note that the data was based on medians and averages. So that means that a portion of the households could afford, these rents, but typically the range indicates that they're very high in this area. And the report includes detailed tables as well as an appendix of all of the survey units that we looked at. And we based it on existing data, which was 2005-2009 American Communities Survey data, as well as the rental data. And we did not make any recommendations as part of the analysis. Thank you.
In terms of when you state 60,000 to allow for that 30% affordability, is there a number that reflects what is existing today, or is it too hard to gauge because of the range in incomes?
Well, it's hard to gauge based on the existing data because we don't really know who's living in the households. All we know is the median income for that particular census tract. So the median, of course, is the middle point. So we can't really say for sure. That's why we did the 30% requirement, because that would show what you need. So if you look at the median income in the census tracts, it's very low. I mean, it's very low. So half of that, you could figure that half the households might have incomes, and that's for a two-bedroom. And the typical size household in those census tracts is between 3 and 4. So you'd want at least a two-bedroom. That would be the most desired size of unit.
Okay. Any questions?
Thank you. So let's step back a little bit. What's the purpose of the Nexus study?
Do you want to respond to that? Since this was just a piece of it, I'll let Faisal.
Faisal Roble, City Planning Department. The premise of the Nexus study was to see if there is a linkage between the project that USC proposed and the housing issues in the area.
And what's your answer?
We did an environmental impact report prior to the Nexus study that did argue that there was no negative impact.
So your Nexus study found that there's no negative impact on the affordability given the adoption of a specific plan of the master plan for USC?
Yes, and most of the data that we shared with you from the market analysis is one that speaks to an existing condition prior to the project and probably post the project. Those conditions would exist.
Got it. And where in your report does it state that there is no negative impact?
No, the environmental impact report.
But it's not in the documents we received here?
No, because this was mainly a needs assessment to just figure out what's out there with or without the project.
Okay, got it. So, and that's what I'm having trouble making those linkages. The information we have before us is a lot of facts and data, but there's very little analysis as to determine whether there is an impact or not. But isn't that the purpose of, there's no linkage between the conclusion you have in some other report and the information provided to us today.
And that's why the Nexus study went beyond the environmental impact report, which is mandated, or by mandate is supposed to have that linkage.
I recall that meeting, which happened probably a couple of years ago, and I was very frustrated at that meeting because it was a conclusion with no information. And yet here we get the data, but there's very little analysis to support that conclusion.
I think with due respect, the report has rigorous analysis. It's just that there is no linkage that we can definitely establish between the project as proposed and the information out there. And the information, as I said, exists. The conditions exist when it comes to housing conditions, and the relationship between that condition and the project as proposed is difficult to make.
This is what we're seeing. We're saying there's a proposed plan, and in the future, this is what would happen if the proposed plan is implemented. You're going to have such and such characteristics in socioeconomic status, people living there, affordability, not affordability, but what we estimate will be the cost to live there. Then you provide us a lot of data about what exists now, but you don't provide that linkage between, okay, this is what's going to be in the future, and this is what exists now, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for the area.
Yep. As you recall, we did a full-blown environmental impact report that made a deliberate relationship between the project as proposed and its direct impact on those housing conditions, and that has been done. Okay. And all that's in the AIR.
Got it. I disagree with the conclusion in that original report, and I don't support your analysis here because it's just a bunch of facts and data. Now, is there any legal ramifications if we would not agree with that conclusion in the previous report that there will be no negative impact? It doesn't take much to know that once that specific plan is in place and you have different types of people moving in there with different income levels, that you are going to displace, and housing is going to be a lot harder to afford in that area. I mean, it's not rocket science to make that determination.
Councilman, I think the project would come to you in full-blown form as we go into the process. The project is not in front of you at this point in time. It's just a status update for you on the Nexus study, and I cannot bring into the discussion what the environmental impact report found, which
is my question.
Yeah.
What is the impact if we say that the specific plan will negatively impact the affordability for housing in that area, or that it will not? What difference does it make for the project in the future?
Again, if I go back to the environmental findings, none. As a matter of fact, the project would bring back students from the community housing areas and then put that in a USC provided
It's disclosure, housing. That's all it is, right? It's disclosure to the public. Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
We would bring the house. Just a quick question. I didn't have the same issue with the data and the facts, just the data. So I'm trying to figure out if it was qualitative or quantitative analysis that went into this data. Was it door-to-door, or is it strictly census information that was fed in?
It was American Community Survey data based on the individual 20 census tracts.
So it's just census data.
But the market data, the rents, that was surveyed off of various rental websites. So what we were doing was trying to show a profile of whether or not these households in the Nexus study area could afford an average market rate rental unit in the Nexus study area.
I see. And as part of that study, I didn't see it in the documents, and perhaps you can submit that in the future, is on the data, the analysis that was obtained from the web and various websites that you.
Yes, and that's in the report.
You've got how many and which ones? I didn't see.
It's got a name of all the websites
that you pulled it from.
Different.
Okay,
there's a footnote in there on what it was. So. But it was just a profile to look at because that was not something that was in the Nexus study, and the community was concerned that we hadn't really looked at the price of rental rate, market rate units in that area.
And were those looked at it as a period of time coinciding with and without while school is in and out of session?
We looked at it in late 2011, so it was around October, November when we did the sample.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
So LHD report would ensue.
Okay. Housing Department, please come on up. Just give us your name.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Claudia Monterrosa from the Los Angeles Housing Department. And as our colleagues from Planning Department were stating, the Housing Department became involved in this discussion at the end of last year. And per your recommendations, we were asked to look at the housing characteristics in terms of affordable housing within the Nexus study. We utilized the same 20 census tracts that the Department of City Planning utilized in their market rate analysis. So in response to this, we prepared a housing supply profile specifically on the multifamily housing stock, including mapping some of our own generated data that's contained within the report that we've submitted to you. Our report also focused on 5 areas: a review of the substandard housing conditions, an inventory of the at-risk affordable housing, an inventory of units subject to the rent stabilization ordinance, the impact of the prevalence and incidence of foreclosures in the area, and then we also took a look at the investment that the city has done, has financed in the area through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So here are some of the findings that I can go over very briefly. There are a total of 8,333 properties in the USC area. This is the 20 census tract area that represents both single-family condominiums and multi-family housing units.
And this is the study area?
This is the study area, the 20 census tracts. There are also over nearly 1,000 units that have been deemed substandard through our systematic code enforcement program, in particular with the score that we have developed, which is called the Reliable Information to Score Effectively system. As of January 31st of this year, there were 73 properties with 244 units in REAP, that is the Rent Escrow Account Program. And the bulk of those are contained within properties that have 5 and more units.
And they're in REIT because?
They're in REIT because of substandard conditions, habitability or otherwise. And so they've been deemed uninhabitable and they have been referred to the REIT program. It's also important to note that the housing stock in this area is relatively older. So the conditions are a little bit more in disrepair. Properties that are subject to the rent stabilization ordinance comprise about 45% of the total housing stock in this area. One of the things that we did is we looked at our affordable housing database to have a horizon of 50 years. The request was to look at a 20-year span period, but we wanted to see what's going to happen in the next 50 years as well. So in looking at this data, we discovered the following. In the next 50 years, there will be approximately 116 properties that will be expiring within this area. Of the total 116 properties, 37% or 44 properties are at risk of expiring within the next 5 years. 75% of the total affordable housing properties expiring in the next 20 years will expire by 2016. Although nearly this comprises nearly 1,300 units that will be expiring in this area, which comprises 5% of the housing stock in the area. In other words, 3 in every 8 existing affordable housings will be lost in the next 5 years. In addition, 90 properties totaling 231 units have been foreclosed upon during the 2011 calendar year. And through our trust fund, since 2003, we have financed 10 housing developments totaling 442 units. So in sum, I just want to let you know that the rate of the potential loss of affordable housing far is outpacing the city's current investment in the area. It's not a surprise in there. The physical and inhabitability conditions of a significant percentage of the housing stock is substandard and in need of reinvestment. There's a significant inventory of housing units subject to the RSO. And as Planning Department reported, there's a high concentration of extremely low and very low income tenants who reside in the area, which underscores the need for affordable housing as well as protecting the RSO inventory in the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from our staff?
Yes, I got some
Okay,
questions.
go ahead.
Thank you, and let me go back to the planning staff. Given that information, I mean, that's just basic data, that you know this is an area that is in need, that it's very affordable housing that exists there now. The specific plan will provide up to 2,500,000 square feet of academic university uses, up to 250,000 square feet of retail commercial uses, approximately 2,135,000 square feet of student faculty housing, providing up to 5,400 student beds, et cetera, et cetera. Now, taking those two things, the information we just heard, what the specific plan will do, how could you conclude in your previous report that it will not have a negative impact on affordability for housing in the area?
Well, I think as I said, the environmental impact report evaluated all these issues and looked at the direct impact the project would have on the area. This is an area that could have been developed by right, given the city zoning that was in place before the specific plan were initiated. So everything that USC is doing will come to you in front of you as an entitlement. The whole purpose of the Nexus study was to avail to you enough information from the entire project's area so that you, as the decision makers, can sit down with SC or help SC come up with a development agreement that the city agrees with. As a staff, we are supposed to look at the environmental connection and linkage, and we did that, and the EIR will come in front of you. But I think...
Got it. What is the name of that report? This happened 2 years ago, where you presented us that conclusion, that there is no negative impact on the affordability if this specific plan should go through.
The environmental impact report has been completed.
It was the EIR?
Yes.
Okay. And have we adopted the EIR? We did.
No, it will come in front of you.
But it's not here yet.
It has been circulated and has been, yes.
Okay, so what did we look at that time when it came before us and that conclusion had been made? That was a draft EIR?
It's a draft EIR.
So that was a draft EIR?
Yes.
Okay. And when that comes before us, this committee will have the opportunity to look at that document, but we cannot change it if we have differences of opinion as to what conclusions are drawn from that report, or what can we do at that time?
Well, Councilman, you can use all the studies, including the environmental report, the Nexus study, and the additional information that we gave you to fashion the final shape of the development agreement. And if there is an interest in looking at the portions of the development agreement...
I got you. But the problem is, if we say there is no impact on affordability housing, there is no problem, so therefore there's nothing to address in the development agreement.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Councilmember Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. So it's a little awkward that the Nexus study is, and the report on the Nexus study is what's being presented today, and the project itself and the EIR is not going to be presented until later. But at that time, you as the decision makers will have the ability to review it and comment and make your determination whether or not you think it's adequate or not. Okay. And then you'll have all of this information in front of you. That's not the determination for today, but you will have that opportunity.
That's what I was looking for, whether we would have that opportunity or not at that time.
Just, okay. Councilperson, if I may clarify, the Nexus study was an additional needs assessment beyond the environmental requirement. And working with the three deputies for the three council offices, we availed all the information to those, and they are playing significant role in shaping the final development agreement with us and with USC.
Okay, and I look forward to getting that here along with the final environment impact report. I have very different conclusions that are being drawn whether there is an impact on affordability there. Thanks.
I think one of the major strategic steps was to reach a level of objectivity in defining and describing the characteristics of current conditions. not interpreted by any one interest and/or stakeholder perspective, but to try to look at all the points of view that exist in the area that's impacted, and we were trying to document those observations through these reports. And it is in increments that we're finally getting to a place where perhaps we're all viewing this landscape with similar lenses, and that has been rather challenging.
Yes.
And so trying to reach that threshold is one of the goals of this process, and that's what we're hearing now. And it is rather painful, but I think it's something each stakeholder would want to understand, and I appreciate the questions, Councilman Rizal, because it leads to those types of conclusions in the future, I hope. So.
And just for the record, when the specific plan was initiated by the council, there was also an intent, as expressed in the motion, that if we find interesting findings as part of the Nexus study and all this endeavor, some of the information that are unraveled could be used for the community plan updates, final policy making. So we're still keeping that in our focus also.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other presentations? I think that covers everybody, right?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions from our staff, for our staff? Seeing none, let's move it to the public comment period. We do have with us several participants. We have with us Brian Lee, like to come on up, and then Robbie Hunter, and then Michael Banner. And you're welcome to come on up and I'll be near the podium. That way we can, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian League with the University of Southern California. I wanted to just make a couple points. There are conclusions in the Nexus study. The Nexus study concluded that the university, through the implementation of its plan, specific plan, would free up 900 housing units for the community. That conclusion was used in the development agreement, and in the development agreement there was a fund set aside to stabilize those housing units in the fact that they could turn back into community and neighborhood housing. I mean, the university has grown and it's become a residential college over the last 20 years. The university hasn't provided adequate student housing for its residential. It's becoming a residential college. All our students live adjacent to campus now. We did a survey, 90% of our undergraduates live adjacent to campus. The specific plan is asking to build 5,400 new student beds. That's how we're going to address the issue of affordable housing in this community. We need affordable housing for our students, and that's a finding that was in the Nexus study. The Nexus study has been a broad data gathering exercise. It's been helpful. The planning department has done a yeoman's effort in putting that together. And you know, we're ready to move forward with that document, and that's what we're asking you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So you consider student housing to be affordable housing?
We need affordable housing for our students. That's my point. You know, part of the university, we have a broad base of students.
Okay. So you do consider student housing as affordable housing. Do you look at students' parental income to determine whether they qualify for affordable housing?
There's a broad equation for giving financial aid to our students. I think 60+% receive some sort of aid package, and that would be considered, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Robbie Hunter, Michael Banner, then Lisa Payne.
Good afternoon. Robbie Hunter, Los Angeles Construction and Building Trades, and I would like to speak to the public benefits and Nexus study. This is a massive construction endeavor, and we represent the construction workers, 140,000 of them in this county. And we do believe within the public benefits should be some standards set for the construction worker. And we're asking that there be a project labor agreement negotiated as a part of the outreach and the approval. And we believe it really should have been in the public benefits study as it is today, because if there's going to be construction at this level, it should be local workers and there should be some standards. It's a tough world out there. A construction worker has no seniority. If it rains, they don't get paid. If they get sick, they don't get paid. And we really think that this approval of the public benefits should have a project labor agreement in there. So ask you to consider requesting that to be a part of the package. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Banner, Lisa Payne, then Maria Vargas. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Michael Banner. I serve on the Community Advisory Board for this project with the university, and by no means I would represent myself as some kind of housing expert, but I do think that the balancing that, from a public policy standpoint, that needs to be considered here is that the university is a key economic engine for the region. If they decide to make this $900 million investment in this part of the city, bring back students from the neighborhoods, that should free up units for housing and affect affordability. I think the other part of it is, will in fact that $900 million investment attract additional investment to the community? And is there some method of public policy where then you can use that attraction element to meet your affordable housing goals by putting something else in place? I'm not sure I know what that is based upon the discussion you had today about redevelopment agencies going away and what tools you have to work with. But I think that's where the opportunity lies right now, with a major employer making a major investment in effectively a low-income community.
Thank you, sir. Lisa Payne, Maria Vargas, then Jackie Dupont-Walker.
Hi, I'm Lisa Payne. I'm with Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. We are a nonprofit community development organizations that build homes affordable, rental homes affordable to families making up to $45,000 and for sale for families making up to $75,000. And we're concerned in general in the city about the build out around the transit system. And this is certainly a big TOD project. National studies have shown that what happens usually around transit stops is that housing prices go up, incomes go up, car ownership goes up, and transit ridership actually falls below what is projected. And this is especially true where it's low income, in areas of low income renters, which is, all these Nexus studies have shown is what this area is. We would urge that while this is an investment in the community, that the total impact be considered and some plan for mitigating the very real threat to the people living there, that this community is feeling, that some kind of plan is put in place to ameliorate that before it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Maria Vargas, then we'll have Jackie Dupont-Walker, then Tom Moxley.
I mean, we just request, we had a translator with us to translate from Spanish, but they had to leave because of the delay. If Ms. Vargas speaks in Spanish, I don't know if there's someone who can translate or if it just is in Spanish for you guys, but not for...
Okay, por favor, si gusta, and we'll do our best.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Vargas, and my concern on this project is the community. First of all, the works on the same place.
¿Gustas hablar español? ¿Es preferible?
Lo mismo, el trabajo para la comunidad, que no se le ofrece a la gente de la comunidad, los pequeños negocios que sobran del área y los mercados que deben de ser con precios módicos para la comunidad. Porque yo estoy de acuerdo en los cambios, solo que yo sí va a traer negocios que son muy caros y que nuestra gente no va a poder ir a gastar ahí. Y esta área ha sido de nuestra comunidad, no nada más de los estudiantes. Otra de las preocupaciones...
Si me permite, más dejar traducir un poco. And maybe Ms. can help me with this one, but my understanding is that she's very concerned with the changes that the current population in the area essentially would struggle if higher cost, higher prices, higher levels of economic standards in business would be a hardship for the local community given the existing conditions of the lower income population in the area.
Otra de las preocupaciones va a ser el alto rate de la renta para la comunidad, que va a haber más desplazamientos porque de todas maneras en la comunidad los apartamentos son más módicos que en los apartamentos de la universidad. Esto.
Okay, gracias.
Gracias. Thank you.
And she is concerned for access to affordable housing. The rents would go up because they would be basically upgraded, and it would be a hardship in the local community as well. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Jacqueline DuPont Walker. I'm president of Ward Economic Development Corporation, a community-based community organization, but also chair of the USC Specific Advisory Committee. We have been at the table representing a diverse group of approximately 25 people from different stakeholder positions in the area. We continue to speak with USC about the community. I would like to report and give you some comfort that there is very positive feedback. We believe that the diversity of the representation at that table will speak for the community. As someone who develops affordable housing, I would tell you that we've been through several waves of what has happened in the community. Gentrification is certainly an issue with or without this particular project. We've been through several waves of housing stock turning over unrelated to USC student housing. What we can see if we look at the old Pepperdine footprint is what happens when a major economic engine leaves the community. We believe the dialogue that is in place is good and will continue. And anyone who wants to be a part of that dialogue is always invited to be there, as demonstrated by the over 600 people who came out when we held the first community meeting to talk about this development. We urge you to receive and file the Nexus study.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Thank you for that. Tom Moxley, I believe it's Rocky Pelicino, I apologize, and then David Robinson. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes and distinguished council members. My name is Tom Moxley, and I'm a business agent for Ironworkers Local 433, and we have been a stakeholder here in Los Angeles since 1903. We have been elevating the lives of men and women since then and raising their standard of living. This is an enormous project that SC is, and we are in support of it. And the local hire agreement is a great idea, and that's what we achieve because we represent those men and women that live here in Los Angeles and in the community. But without a project labor agreement, a local hire agreement will not work. We see this at the Pike down in Long Beach and the disaster that was. We see it on the first phase of the Expo line with a local hire without the project labor agreement. We would encourage you during your development agreement that in that has not only the local hireman, but the mechanism and the tool by which that achieves the goals of a community benefit is through a project labor agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, and I'm sorry if I butchered the last name.
Close enough.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Rocky Pelicino. I'm a business representative for the Sheet Metal Workers Local 105 in the greater Los Angeles area. I've been a labor leader for some 20 years now, and I must say, ladies and gentlemen, not only to thank each and every one of you at the table, but for everybody else, for us to be able to come in the people's house and to share our opinions about any project out there, especially on this particular one for a project labor agreement. Not only creating a PLA, I consider PLA as a partnership labor agreement because it allows both on the labor side and on the end user to become a partner and be able to utilize and be a good steward over the project and in essence any money to be spent. But more important than that, as I was reading this handout, I got to item number 21 where it did say participate in local hiring. I myself am a trustee on our apprenticeship program. We have 600 apprentices currently in our program, and I'm most proud to say we have a 98% graduation rate in our program. It's a 5-year program. It costs approximately $50,000 to educate one man or woman in our program. So we do spend a lot of money. It's all employer driven by contributions. I urge of you to and ask and beg whatever it's going to take, not only for a PLA for this project, but also to incorporate local hiring so we could bring in young men and women in the greater area around this particular project if he or she chooses to be a sheet metal worker or any other respective craft to join an apprenticeship program. Our doors are open, we welcome, and we will assist in any way that we can to help young men and women out there in the greater Los Angeles area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is David Robinson, Nona Rondos, and then Pat Stewart. And if we can stay focused on the item in front of us, Your comments should be connecting with the action in front of this committee. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is David Robinson. I work for SAGE, and SAGE is a member of the Unidad Coalition, United Neighbors in Defense Against Displacement. We have a detailed letter that I'll submit, and I'm going to go totally off script. I hope you'll read the letter. It covers a lot of points, but I want to respond to some of what was brought up here, and I thank you for asking excellent questions today. I want to point out the EIR excluded by its nature the very issues that we're talking about here. We were told they're not covered by CEQA. There's disagreement about that, but the planning department felt they weren't covered by CEQA. So these issues of affordability were not considered ones that need to be mitigated. The Nexus study was supposed to be broader. It was supposed to, in fact, look at many other things. And it begins, when you read that document, it's much broader and looks at them, and then the final section where they get to recommendations, and we submitted testimony about this twice before now, suddenly narrows and becomes a defense of the EIR. They leave off everything they found earlier and just go say there are no mitigations. Now we get this actually excellent new data that's just been released, and it's had no influence so far on the specific plan and development agreement, and we've just heard the planning department say it shouldn't, that these are conditions that existed before. So I can't believe I have to say this again. We all know this. The conditions have gotten to this crisis point because USC took in thousands more students over a decade, didn't house them, turned the other way, as the city did, as displacement was rampant in the neighborhoods, and now we're told these conditions just exist. They exist in large part because of USC's choice not to house its students. And now we're at a moment where the city's crafting a development agreement and the specific plan and needs to account for these issues. I'll also want to take issue with the numbers that are used. USC and the planning department are saying that USC will create significant numbers of new beds, but actually if you look at the projected growth of USC's student body by 2030, it will exceed the number of new beds. And the new beds, by the way, don't seem to be 5,400, they seem to be 4,200 because USC is planning to demolish 1,200. Why they are allowed to keep using that false information?
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Thank you, sir. Nona Randos?
Good afternoon. I'm Nona Randois. I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles here on behalf of the Unidad Coalition organizations, and I'm a proud USC Trojan here to fight on for a specific plan that does not harm our community. In contravention of this committee's motion back in 2008, the Nexus study findings have not been used to mitigate potentially significant impacts of USC's development plan or to inform the specific plan or the development agreement. Instead, the city has continued to expedite the plan and prevented meaningful input even from its own city departments such as LAHD. The city has put the cart before the horse. The EIR came out first, then the specific plan came out and the development agreement, and in our opinion, the Nexus study isn't even completed yet. So as Councilman Huizar pointed out, there's not a linkage between the previous documents that have already been released and the information that's before you today. We also want to point out that the affordable housing provision, so-called affordable housing provision in the development agreement, in our opinion, is a gentrification provision that will make...
Excuse me a moment, ma'am. Terry Coppin, Messiah City Attorney's Office. The matter before you is a report on the Nexus study. The development agreement, the specific plan, the EIR, are not in front of you today, so the comments should be kept to the Nexus study itself. And there will be opportunity later to comment on the other documents.
Well, thank you for that comment, but let me say we've had a number of speakers come up that spoke about a number of things, and I would ask that we give the same courtesy at least to be fair to other people who come up, and they're not before us, but they're somewhat related to the topic before us, so I would ask the chair that if people do talk about the development agreement or the ERR, that they be allowed to speak on those items as well, just to be fair to other speakers who've come up and spoken on other items as well.
It's a notice issue, and so I recognize that it's difficult to separate the two, but I'm just cautioning the committee. And
so perhaps in your comments, make that link with the Nexus study?
Yes, well, as I said, this committee's motion in December of 2008 required the Nexus study to inform the specific plan and the development agreement, and the EIR is supposed to study those documents. So, as I said, it has gone really in a backwards order, and so we ask this committee to require the planning department to really take the time to take into account the fully completed Nexus study, especially the two new affordable housing studies that are before you today, in a very meaningful and productive way in the specific plan and development agreement, rather than displacing the already heavily impacted community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Rangel. We have next Pat Stewart, Douglas Marion, and then Jim Irwin, and that will conclude.
Good afternoon. My name is Pat Stewart. I'm a representative for IBW Local 11. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today to speak regarding the specific plan public benefit. You know, this in theory could be a great project. Unfortunately, there are some issues. A project of this magnitude should absolutely have a project labor agreement. There should be some trigger or some mechanism that would make sure there was local hire and community involvement in the project, and a project labor agreement would do that. And also a project labor agreement would make sure that competition is based for the right reasons, that it's based on...
Right. Again, Nexus study is in front of us. I hear what you're saying, but we have to draw that connection.
Okay. But just, real quick to wrap up with it, just to say that it should be based for the right reasons, that, workers should have an opportunity to get not just a job, but a career and an opportunity to be able to give back to the community. So with that, we're urging that you move forward with this, with the PLA.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Douglas Marion, Jim Irwin, and then finally, I believe it's Anna Franco. Douglas Marion? Jim Irwin? Coming up, Jim.
Good afternoon. Jim Irwin. I'm with the Painters and Allied Trades Union. We represent painters, tapers, drywall finishers, and glazers. In regards to the public benefits section of this agreement, what's missing is negotiating a project labor agreement, and I would urge that take place with this agreement. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anna Franco? With CD Tech. Are you here? I'm assuming Douglas Marion is not in the room either? Okay, no Douglas Marion, all right. Ma'am, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name is Ana Franco and I work for CD Tech as community organizing. I work for this community for more than 3 years, and I live in that community for almost 30 years. And I like to ask for this project, please think about the community. We want all the services, but we want to involve the community. Please see what is good for the community and what is not. I appreciate you have a lot of people today, but I didn't see these people in my area, in my community. They are visitors, they support this project, but they are not involved in our community. They don't know nothing about our needs. So please, think about the community. We have rights, we have families to support. So once again, projects are good, but make sure to be involved with the community. Make decisions together. Because I attend some meetings, some presentation, but the community is not there. Only the people who present the project and very few people from organizations. Please, think about the community. Community make the vote when have elections, so community need to be involved in those projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Franco. Thank you very much, and that concludes the public comment. Again, this is in coordination with the council districts 8 and 9 and District 1. My district, we've been working together and trying to achieve a level of understanding of impacts. It's been challenging and difficult, but we will continue to move in that direction. So if my colleagues are okay with this, next step would be to instruct the planning department to continue providing status updates and to continue coordinating with the council districts 1, 8, and 9, and include any other city departments that are involved with the impacts. We can receive and file both planning and housing department reports responding to the plum directives of August 20th of 2011 and November 20th of 2011. So we're okay with that? Anything else, Councilmember?
I'm fine with that. I just need to know what the next steps are. We've had the presentation of this Nexus study today. In this development process, when will the development agreement be presented to council and the final environmental impact report?
Michelle Levy again with City Planning. We do have 2 official public hearings scheduled for March 14th and 15th, coming up in 2 weeks. And at that time, we encourage all stakeholders to come and make comments and give their testimony, get that in the official public record. We have a tentative date scheduled for City Planning Commission in May. At this point, that's all we know, and from there...
That's for the EIR and also the draft, the development agreement, are they going together? Are they,
right, so before the City Planning Commission, once the project gets to that stage, will be the development agreement, the specific plan, and the environmental impact report.
My final question is, so the purpose of this Nexus study was to inform those documents that will go through this process. What steps do you intend to take to use this study to look at those documents once again before they get presented to the Planning Commission?
Well, certainly, as we go through every stage of the process, we take in the public comments that we've received, and we very much consider this to be working drafts at this point, and we'll continue to make recommendations based on the feedback that we hear as we feel appropriate. This is just one stage in the process. We believe that through the public process, we will get more input from a variety of stakeholders, and that will help shape the documents ultimately that are adopted.
Great. Thank you very much. And just my concluding remarks are that, the EIR is mostly disclosure document, and you present a problem and you present some potential mitigation for that problem. I'm concerned that here that I'm not part of the council districts that are part of this process. I'm not there every day. I don't see what this is, but just in me looking at this Nexus study and looking at what the proposed development will provide, there is an impact to the affordability of housing in that area. And for us as a city to put out a document to say that there is none, that does concern me. I hope that you would look at that again and reevaluate if, even when the documents come back, whether you do believe there will be an impact or not. Saying it's an impact is just saying what we believe is there. We're not saying we're going to do everything to mitigate that and we're going to, bend over backwards. It's just acknowledging that something exists. And like with any other project, once we make that acknowledgement, we try to do the best as a city to accommodate whatever impacts that we'll have in the local community. But if we don't accommodate this one issue, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice for future development, whether it's for the university, for the people who live there. I just think we need to look at this data again. Thank you.
Okay, so that being said, any other comments, Councilmember?
No.
Okay. So that will conclude item 3, and we have the directives that have been stated, and look forward to moving on this project. And that'll be the end of that item. So let's jump to item number 6. And I know this is the big ticket item. We do have a lot of cards on both sides. And my understanding is that there is a presentation reflecting the 2 different positions. As you can see, we have a lot of cards on both sides, so we're going to probably go with, well, let's take it one step at a time. So let's hear the report first, and we'll go from there.
Lucy Ibarra with the Planning Department. Before you is several appeals to a conditional use that was approved by the City Planning Commission to allow a charter school in the M2-1 zone. There's approximately 6 appeals from residents in the neighborhood. Excuse me.
Yes.
My
let's do this one. Let's make sure everybody's focused on the presentation here? Okay, go ahead.
My understanding is that the applicant and the appellants have been working up until the last minute to kind of work out some issues to alleviate some of the concerns they had regarding traffic, enrollment, and the recreational facilities in the area. And I believe that they have that presentation for you here today.
Okay. I do know that Councilman Rosendahl, so you want to just open up with the presentations then?
My presentation? Or their
Do you want to present, or do you want to hear the...
Well, we're just here we're abreast of the recent developments as of today.
Okay.
So we're here to hear the changes in the same way that you are.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Watkins. So let's do this. I want to welcome Councilman Rosendahl, who's joined us here. What we'll do is, typically in our process, we will listen to the staff that gives a presentation, and then we will listen to the appellant, and then we listen to the applicant. And that's our typical process. But my understanding is that there are 2 video presentations representing both sides. So what we'll do then, let's make sure everyone has their equal time, is we'll hear the appellants, or view the appellant's video first, and then we'll listen to the video of the applicant, and we'll stop there, and then we'll take another assessment of what direction we want to go. But Councilman Rosendahl, did you want to make any statements at this time?
Comment that this has been an extraordinary period. The room is packed. There's tremendous interest in this community on all sides of it. And I want to make sure that the appellates can do a full-blown presentation, and all those folks who want to speak on it can. And then, of course, the school folks react to it and all of that, and then let the appellates come up for their final comments, similar to the process that was used before the Citywide Planning Commission with the initial application went. I will express myself after the full discussion interaction, and I will urge my colleagues to ask as many questions about whatever. We have the planning department here that will react to some of it, and I look forward to a dialogue at this point.
Okay. Before we get the video started, just for our own sense of who's in the room, those that are here supporting the appellants, could you please stand? The appellants. Okay. And those supporting the applicants, thank you. You can sit down. The applicants. Oh, you divided
that's
very nice.
They actually divided.
Democracy should be so neat.
It's like a wedding.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so let's hear from the appellants. And are we queued up for the video on the appellants? No, my understanding is
line up to do our presentation?
okay. Wait, just a moment. My understanding is that there, Councilman Rosendahl, we have a video from the appellants, or
No, we just have a PowerPoint.
a PowerPoint. So who's presenting the PowerPoint?
There are about 7 of us who are going to speak to different parts of the
Okay, so we got
PowerPoint.
20 minutes for the PowerPoint.
We were told we would have 30 minutes, and that they would have 30 minutes.
Right.
Okay.
We've been conferring with
Is that what this is?
How much
Councilman
time do you need?
Rosendahl. Yes.
You
We've
need
been-
30 minutes?
Pardon? 30 minutes. We were
Just
told
for
we
the-
would have 30 minutes, they would have 30 minutes, and we would rebut.
Okay.
That's kind of what
That's what
they've
you're
been
prepared
doing
for. Let's
up to
go.
this point.
Let's do that then.
Is that okay?
Okay. And if you
so-
line up your presenters, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
So let's start back to 30 in just a moment. Let's not trigger the clock yet until they're ready to go. Can the appellants please line up and let's get going?
Mr. Chairman, while we're lining up, may I ask a question of Councilman Englander?
Well, why don't we do this? I want to make sure that we're fair, so we're going to keep everything within those 30 minutes. Don't start the clock yet. Let's go back to 30.
Well, this is before the 30 minutes starts.
No,
This is a procedural question.
Okay, procedure.
Right. I merely, with respect, want to make sure that Councilman Englander is comfortable sitting in on this matter, given his close familial relationship with one of the lobbyists for New West Charter School. I merely want to ask the question to make sure he doesn't have any level of discomfort in voting and considering this matter.
I appreciate the concern of my comfort, but I will address that both from a comfort and legal perspective.
Thank you.
I never have ever had a financial interest at all with anybody on either side of this issue, currently representing, or maybe even representing them in the future. So I'll be clear on that there's no legal or comfort issue in me either supporting or opposing this school.
Very good. I
Okay.
in no way intend any
Sir,
I appreciate the
result.
question.
I merely wanted to make
Sir,
sure
let's just get back to the
we're
30
on the
minutes.
same page.
Are we ready to begin?
I am.
Okay, let's go. 30 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Dallinger.
PowerPoint.
And I am, excuse me. I'm a resident.
Operating the PowerPoint.
Go ahead.
My name is Tim Dallinger, and I'm a resident of the neighborhood. I live 1 block away from the proposed site. I have filed an appeal of the city planning's decision. I've also filed an appeal of the Department of Transportation supplemental assessment. Both of those matters are before this committee today, as I understand it. By way of introduction, let's be clear about a couple of fundamental facts. One fact is that approximately 1,000 people, give or take, daily are going to come to this site. That includes students, teachers, staff, vendors, visitors. 1,000 people are coming daily to this site. You have to bear in mind the magnitude of that number. If you take that number and you parse it a little bit, this is a 50,000 square foot building. If there's 875 students, then you're looking at approximately 57 square feet per student. If you subtract from that furniture, fixtures, and equipment, walls, lockers, administrative space, you get approximately 40 square feet per student. That's approximately a space of 6 feet by 7 feet. To the best of my knowledge, I think even jails give inmates more room than that, 6 feet by 7 feet. This is not a neighborhood school. This is a commuter school. Only 5 students, 5 of the entire present student body come from the local neighborhood. There are almost no minority, disabled, or English as a second language students at this school. There are virtually no Hispanic, Black, or other minorities represented in the student body, even though the applicant claims that they admit their students by a lottery. I refer you to Exhibit D of my appeal. That's a graphic representation of the demographics of this school compared to other schools. Let me discuss a few documents that are important for you to be aware of. There is a letter from Councilman Rosendahl dated February 14, 2012 to your committee in which he expresses his opposition to this plan as presently proposed. There is also a letter of February 23, 2012 to the Department of Transportation from Councilman Rosendahl in which he expresses, quote unquote, his deep concerns about the Department of Transportation's analysis and requests a prompt response. There is a letter from Stephen Zimmer of the LAUSD Board to Councilman Rosendahl dated February 14, 2012, expressing very strong opposition to this project. And finally, there is a letter dated approximately February 21st, 2012 from Arthur Kassan, professional engineer and traffic consultant, commenting on the inaccuracies of the DOT assessment. By contrast, the documents submitted by the applicant, by DOT, and by the Planning Commission are inaccurate, incomplete, and unfinished. The CPC decision is based on findings that cannot be supported by the actual facts on the ground. The decision fails to comply with the four-pronged test for issuance of a CUP, with which I'm sure you're all familiar. The proposed location will not be desirable to the public convenience or welfare. The proposed location is not proper in relation to adjacent uses. The proposed location will be materially detrimental to the character of development in the immediate neighborhood. And finally, the proposed location will not be in harmony with various elements and objectives of the general plan. Now, I'll get to 1, 2, and 3 in a minute, but as to the general plan...
So you know you have several speakers behind you, right?
I know that.
Okay.
As to the general plan, the West LA Community Plan requires the following. Goal 1, a safe and secure and high-quality residential environment for all economic, age, and ethnic segments of the community. This proposal negatively impacts elderly Japanese Americans who live in the neighborhood, who use the streets and sidewalks and park regularly, as well as many other elderly or retired residents and families with small children who rely upon neighborhood facilities. Goal 4 of the plan requires adequate recreation and park facilities which meet the needs of the residents in the community. This proposal negatively impacts the local park, Stoner Park, which is already overcrowded, by proposing to utilize the park for required physical education activities. Goal 6 of the plan requires public schools that provide a quality education for all of the city's children, including those with special needs, and adequate school facilities to serve every neighborhood in the city. This plan does not permit enrollment of all children and fails almost completely to enroll special needs children, minorities, and ESL students. Specific issues: there is woefully inadequate parking for the proposed use. A school is arguably a permissive, non-conforming, changed use at this site in the M2 zone. However, it requires conformity with applicable parking requirements. There are 100 spaces, in this case required, giving 50,000 square feet in the building that sits at the site. That's from the LA Zoning and Parking Code, section 12.21A4. There exists now only approximately 55 spaces, and those 55 spaces may be reduced to as little as 37 by the reverse traffic flow, which is proposed as part of the carpooling process. 37 spaces for 1,000 people daily? That's nonsense. There are no agreements in place for any additional parking. Applicant has now indicated that there is a series of special events that occur during the years at which as many as 2,500 people will attend, even assuming 4 people per vehicle. That's 600 cars that need to park in the neighborhood several times a year. The trip cap mitigation as proposed by DOT is unworkable and ineffective, and you'll hear from our traffic consultant about that. There is additional traffic which is proposed on already heavily burdened surrounding streets, and you'll hear from our consultant about that as well. There are enforcement issues regarding the traffic proposal. The so-called homeschool contract, upon which the applicant relies heavily, is ineffective, unenforceable, and illegal. First of all, there is no proposed homeschool contract for the new site that we've ever seen. California Education Code, section 47605, requires a charter school to admit all pupils who wish to attend the school, and such admission cannot be conditioned upon agreement to a homeschool contract. The homeschool contract is therefore unenforceable regarding carpool and parking matters. When LAUSD refused applicants' request to renew its charter last year, one of the bases for the refusal was this homeschool contract. The response by applicant was, through its lawyers, to say, oh, the only purpose of the homeschool contract is to ensure that we get at least a certain number of hours of volunteer time from our parents. Nothing to do with carpooling or parking or any of the other issues involved in this appeal. There are no proposed improvements to infrastructure. Even the West LA Neighborhood Council, when it voted unanimously against this project, talked about sidewalks, crossings, traffic control mechanisms, photo monitoring, intensive enforcement measures, etc. It will be a negative impact on the local public high school, University High, which you will hear about from one of the other speakers. There will result in degradation of the potential for additional employment in the M2 zone. There will only be approximately 35 employees or so at this site, given its proposed use. This site could involve as many as 100+ employees, depending on parking arrangements. There will be a negative impact on immediate neighboring businesses, which you'll hear about from one of the neighboring businessmen. The proposed facility is like a prison for students. There's no phys ed facility, so the local park will be further inundated and overused. There's no auditorium or food facility, no outdoor facilities of any kind. The fundamental flaw is the site is directly adjacent to long-standing residential use and therefore not desirable or harmonious. If you compare this to Wildwood's CUP, which you all approved in April of 2000, that CUP said, quote, "The nearest residential uses are more than 600 feet to the north and approximately 500 feet to the south and physically remote from the school site." We don't have that here. There is no buffer here. Based on all of the foregoing, applicant should be required to resubmit its application for a CUP, including substantially reduced enrollment, as well as enforceable traffic, parking, and neighborhood impact mitigation, and a full EIR. This committee must deny this CUP. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, before we have an...
Sir?
That's okay. I just want to make an announcement that I'm going to take a break in the bathroom break, amongst other things, but there's a squawk box back there, so we're still listening. If either any of us get up to go back there, we're still listening to the testimony, just in case you see us not sitting up here.
I wish I had that in my office.
There are speakers back there. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Arthur Casson. I'm a consulting traffic engineer. I've been a traffic engineer for 52 years. I am the consultant to the appellants to the neighborhood. According to the school's own traffic engineer, the school will have significant traffic impacts at 9 of the 14 intersections analyzed. The mitigations for significant impacts of school traffic are not feasible and will leave the impacts in effect. That is true of the measures that were presented in the original traffic report and of all of the measures that the school has added since that report was done, even though those measures have not been fully analyzed by their traffic engineer. Therefore, the traffic analysis is not up to date with the current school proposal and is incomplete. A mitigated negative declaration is not adequate, and EIR is needed to address the unmitigated impacts. After the traffic study was completed by the school's consultants, we found that to make the mitigation work, the number of students per parent's vehicle would far exceed the capacity of most passenger cars at an average of about 14 students per vehicle. Even with an assumption of 30% of the students using transit, bicycles, or walking, there would have to be more than 9 students per parent's vehicle, still far in excess of a car's capacity. Therefore, the measures originally proposed in the traffic report cannot work. When that was pointed out, the school applicants proposed reducing the maximum student enrollment from 875 to 750. With that, there would still have to be an average of about 12 students per parent's vehicle for the program to work. So the school applicants proposed adding 2 passenger buses to transport students. In the original application, the school representatives stressed that there would be no bus service for students. It's in the formal application. It was so important to them that it's a single sentence standing by itself: there will be no buses. In the traffic study report, the sentence, the proposed school does not propose to provide any type of formal busing program for its students. The Planning Commission conditions, including a prohibition on school buses or vans. Yet the school now proposes 2 60-passenger buses. How are those 60-passenger buses to maneuver on the narrow local streets of that neighborhood? But where will the buses pick up the students? It's proposed to be 1 or 2 meeting places, remote from the school, so that they won't have the parent traffic at the school, it'll be in somebody else's backyard. Now, they have not designated these meeting places, and on the west side, there's not a great many to choose from. When the parents are taking the children to the buses in the morning and then leaving the site to go home or go to work, there will be 100 to 120 trips to each one of these remote sites. 200 to 240 trips if the remote sites are combined into one location. There's no analysis of what the impacts will be of these trips to and from the remote sites. It's, let's move the problem over there, and then we don't have to look at it. In addition to the new buses, the school is proposing to distribute 200 transit passes to students. That's more than a quarter of the total students using transit. That's a very high proportion that cannot be documented as a practical situation at this site because the nearest transit routes are quite distant from the school. More than 1/3 of a mile to Olympic Boulevard routes, 1/3 to 2/3 of a mile to lines on Santa Monica Boulevard and on Pico Boulevard, and a half mile to the future Expo Rail Station, which won't be open for at least 5 years from now at the rate that they're building. The school has produced no evidence that traffic would actually be used extensively by students. But accounting for the 2 school buses and full use of the transit passes, 200 transit passes, there would still have to be an afternoon pickup of 430 students, which would require an average of 8.5 students per parent's vehicle. Still well beyond the capacity of most private passenger vehicles. Regarding students biking to school, well, let's skip that for the time. Seeing that the proposed mitigation measures would still not work mathematically, the school may propose to you today that 150 students, that's 20% of the total, will stay late and leave the school after 5 p.m. each day. First, that is a violation of the application, which specified that all students will be dismissed by 3:30 p.m., and of the Planning Commission condition, which specifies that student pickup end at 3:45 p.m. Second, the school traffic consultant did not address any traffic concerns during any time after 3:45 p.m. Therefore, the traffic study is incomplete on this vital issue of traffic impacts during the commuter traffic peak hours, as well as on the school buses and the reduction in enrollment. I'm going to skip to my concluding paragraph. We asked that the traffic study be revised and expanded to reflect the reduction in school enrollment and to address the effectiveness of each of the many new measures that the school has introduced since the study was completed. Without an updated and more complete study, the feasibility of the mitigation measures cannot be evaluated, and there is no proof that the significant impacts can be mitigated. Thank you.
Okay, can you just stop the time for a second? So you have 12 minutes and 29 seconds left. I don't know how many speakers you have left, but I just want to make sure you're aware that each speaker should be cognizant of that, given the amount of time that's been already taken. Go ahead.
Okay, next slide. This shows some other contradictory information regarding visitor parking on the west side and the main visitor entry on the east side. Their design has been flawed from the start, and that's why they keep making so many corrections. This shows that there's an implied intention to have lots of visitors parking on the street and entering from Armacost on the bottom, where you see those 3 arrows. But that's in violation of the CUP, where they're supposed to be parking on site, where the single arrow is, where there is insufficient parking. There are a little more than a dozen spaces for visitors, maybe. Next slide. Our streets are already problematic. 2,000 additional car trips will further imperil pedestrian safety. These photos were taken within the last couple of months to show that the blue arrow shows the school site, proposed school site, and those are accidents at Brockton where everyone's supposed to be queuing up to get into the school. Next slide, and Dr. Sims, or Brian P., please.
We have some serious concerns. Our city is facing an economic crisis, and we really need jobs. Our M2 industrial sites are being converted all over the city into other uses. Why? Because landlords that are land barons that inherited these properties have obsolete buildings at very low rents for M2. They then have the opportunity to utilize this school in an attempt to get more rent for an M2 location, but we're losing the jobs. We're losing the tech businesses, and it's against the specific plan of West Los Angeles and the general plan. We have here Dr. Sims. Dr. Sims is from the adjacent property, the cryobank. It's a high-tech business with over 100 high-tech earners. Thank you.
And whenever I hear this term, Dr. Sims, I think of a tombstone in Scotland that says, "Here lies John McPherson, born a man and died a gastroenterologist." So I think that we're all humans and we all share common goals and aspirations, regardless of titles, positions, and what we do for a living. I represent the owners of the California Cryobank, which occupies the 2 immediately adjacent properties. The company has about 140 employees in total, about 100 of those on site. We have doubled the employment in the past 5 years from about 75 to about 140 at the present time. And we have 4 entrances that are directly affected by this traffic plan. These plans will be a disaster to our employees, to our clients, our customers, and our vendors, because it has the threat to completely block any access we have to our property. We have 2 entrances on Armacost and we have 2 on LaGrange. It's directly affected by the traffic flow plan that's proposed. Right now, it's a nuisance. Today, it's risky. I drive out of that driveway every night hoping I don't get hit, and I drive those intersections and hoping I don't get hit also. So I think that this thing proposes to go from a nuisance problem to a nightmare for those of us who live and work in that area. We have businesses. We've invested a substantial amount of money in those properties. We're currently doing about $1 million in rehabilitation, seismic upgrading of the 1935 property. We spent about $3 million rehabbing and rebuilding the one at the corner of Armacost and LaGrange. I would hate to have all that investment go down the tubes for an outsider coming in, displacing residents and businesses who provide jobs and services for this community. Thank you.
Why does New West Charter want this location? On the next slide, you can see that it's a moneymaker for them. New West gains up to 75% of its annual facilities rent and lease costs just for locating near a Title I elementary school, and I'll explain that to you as we come along. But this particular location that they're holding so dear to is a moneymaker for them. We're trying to find out why else they want this location and no other. And it has numerous disadvantages to our community that Tim Dallinger has explained to you. Next slide. We've shown them alternate properties for lease on real transportation corridors where they wouldn't have these problems of parking and traffic. They're not responding to that. They say they've looked for other places. They say they can't afford anything less than $1.40 a square foot, but really they're only going to have to pay 35 cents a square foot if the taxpayers are paying the rest of it according to SB 740. Next slide. From the beginning, this organization has not done effective community outreach. They planned and developed all their designs and schemes without consulting with the neighborhood. When we did respond to their ideas for the first 5 months, they didn't do anything to show that they were responsive to our concerns. Next slide. They persistently ignore our input. They contested the majority vote of the West LA Neighborhood Council to oppose the CUP after the meeting was concluded. That caused them not to listen to our concerns, but to only escalate their high-priced lobbying campaign. Next slide. There's also been an escalating pattern of harassment and insults and intimidation. Community stakeholders have become victims from having their property vandalized to being chased down Missouri Avenue, being cursed at by someone who supports New West Charter. Incidents like this never happened in our neighborhood prior to this school coming in and prior to these individuals thinking that they deserve whatever they can pay for. Next slide. We've tried to understand what motivates New West Charter, but the LAUSD Board of Ed also has serious doubts about their operations. We're not taking it personally. LAUSD says they don't serve a student population representative of the larger district. They've refused to divulge information about their governance practices. New West Charter can enroll select students by exemption. That means a founder's child or a sibling, but everybody else gets a lottery ticket. Supposedly you have a 1 in 2,500 chance of getting into that school by preference or lottery ticket. Next slide. Investigating further, we found that while they do have high test scores, they are similar to GATE students at LAUSD. But their numbers don't reflect significant portions of the population that we have in LAUSD. There, you'll see all those asterisks on the bottom of that chart. Those are the economically disadvantaged students, the English language learners, the students with disabilities, and the students receiving migrant education services. Those are the lower performing students who don't even appear statistically at New West Charter. Next slide. This shows it graphically. How many students are disadvantaged? You'll see a chart. All those blue lines, red lines, green lines are the students who are part of LAUSD. The purple line GATE students, gifted and talented students, are also part of LAUSD, but they are the overwhelming majority of New West Charter. Next slide. Changing the land use to build a school infrastructure for 500 high school students takes funding away from existing schools. Here's the math. Over $2 million is what it costs for those 500 students alone. So you lose teachers, you lose classrooms, you lose electives and enrichment classes for existing high school students. Charter schools of advantaged students reap the benefits, while LAUSD schools serving disadvantaged students absorb the losses. Next slide. New West Charter discloses income for instruction, but they also stand to gain money exclusively for rent. Just by locating near Brockton Elementary, they stand to receive almost $750,000 per year without ever having to enroll one Brockton student. Next slide. State and federal law prohibits students from those schools from being given an exemption. They may neither be exempted nor given preference if they're in just because they're from that school. If you want to change that fact, if they want to change that fact, they're going to have to change state and federal law. I don't think that's what the Plum Committee is meant to do. Next slide. According to Bonnie Galloway, from the Education Administrator for the Charter Schools Division of CDE, she doesn't believe that a charter school could necessarily take all of the pupils from a given feeder school. End of story. Next slide. New West Charter makes lots of promises. One of those promises has to do with their carpooling contract, whether they can do it, whether they really have a contract or not. Here's their contract. Here's a car parked in the red zone, in a driveway, student entering the car from the street. They have an elaborate map of how they're supposed to do it. They don't do it. Next slide. They've made so many last-minute changes. They've shape-shifted so many times through the past 6 months, a loopy flow, a reverse flow, a revised revision to the reverse flow. all of which create their own set of problems. There are too many problems here. Next slide, please. Whose interests are represented by this process? New West Charter has lobbyists and lawyers on their side, and they're very persuasive. We have residents, existing businesses, future entrepreneurs, park patrons, public school students, city employees, West LA commuters, and California taxpayers. And it's up to you, the politicians, to decide what happens next.
Hi, my name is Xochitl Gonzalez. I'm a member of the West Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. We voted unanimously to reject the school. There were many reasons, the impacts to the neighborhood, to the residents, to the businesses. I know that we have spoken to the businesses at their current location that abut the property that New West is currently at, and they have spoken of being strangulated by the parents dropping off and picking up the students. This is a tremendous concern to us. And again, what we've heard from the previous speakers is that they have not addressed the students that will be picked up after school. We'd love to see a full EIR.
Hi, my name is Daniel Mammon. I'm a uni student, and I'm also a former New West student. Right now, I am against New West for multiple reasons. Number one, it doesn't make sense that there's a high school in the area that can serve the same purposes as what New West can offer. It also doesn't make sense that we're losing teachers when they're getting money so they can fund their school. Lastly, the community will greatly be affected by this. We're a community school. We help the community on the weekends. We also help them during the week. I don't see any way how New West can help them with their location. Thank you.
Thank you. Last 30 seconds.
This is a land use issue. Land use decisions impact all our children. All our children are future leaders of our society. We should lead by example. Our example should be to provide equal opportunity to all members of society. Decisions should not be influenced by advantaged individuals at the expense of the disadvantaged.
Thank you.
6 seconds. All right. All I want. My name is Brian Maeda. I live directly across the street from this proposed school. I've lived there for 60 years.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So I'm very aware of the traffic congestion.
Out of fairness, I want to keep it to 30. Thank you, sir. Okay, so these were the appellants, and now let's hear from the applicant. And again, 30 minutes.
We have a PowerPoint slide that I want to get set up, if that's okay.
Okay, is it being set up now?
It's on the screen. We just have to get to it. Okay. Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Craig Lawson. I'm a land use consultant here this afternoon representing New West Charter School, and thank you so much for hearing us. I'm joined today by members of our project team, including Dr. Sharon Weir, the principal, Jennifer Wen, the project architect, and we have several hundred supporters of the school. You saw them stand earlier. I would ask them to please raise their hand so we know who all the supporters are. Thank you. Thanks very much. For the record, we have submitted packets to you that look like this, which include a detailed letter outlining the reasons why we would ask you to reject the various appeals. We provided rebuttal to the appellant's points, and we would ask that you uphold the Planning Commission, which approved the requested conditional use permit. There's also a separate letter from an attorney that's working with us, Fred Gaines from Gaines and Stacy, and he'll be speaking in a moment. New West is a high-performing, independent public charter school that presently serves 340 students at its current location near Pico and Barrington in West LA. They're in a commercial building which did not require a conditional use permit, so there is no conditions in operating that site at present. Over the last few years, there's been a growing demand for higher enrollment at New West. And last year, the school received over 900 applications for only 79 open spots. For more than 7 years, New West has been searching for a site to relocate to in order to meet this demand for additional enrollment. New West has found a suitable building at Armacosta, Missouri in West LA. It's an almost 50,000 square foot warehouse type building, and as you can see, it's in an area with offices, light manufacturing uses, the LA Fitness Health Club immediately to the west, and single-family homes across the street to the north and the east. Our slides are up there if you're able to watch them. In this case, the M2 industrial zone is located immediately across from the R1 residential zone. This presents a land use conflict between industrial and residential uses, a conflict that has existed at this location for more than 50 years. And what's before you, as Ms. Gruen said, is a land use issue. There are a number of existing schools, both public and private, in the immediate area, two of which successfully operate in industrially zoned sites, the Wildwood School and the Westview School. However, there are no other charter schools in this immediate area. And as you know, there's no designated school zone in the Los Angeles zoning code. Schools are typically located in neighborhoods near residences, as they're part of the community. And there are many examples in West Los Angeles of schools that are located immediately across the street from single-family homes. There's pictures above of Overland Elementary, Venice High School, Palms Middle School, all of these in very close to residential areas. We feel this is an appropriate site for a school. As you can see from the plan above, there is sufficient space to accommodate the carpool plan for on-site student pickup and drop-off. There are 55 spaces on-site, which is the amount that has always been at this building, and Building and Safety has indicated that that is the appropriate amount for this site. The reverse flow access plan, which is something that the neighborhood had requested and which DOT has approved, would allow for 2 lanes of on-site queuing and would also restrict access so that people are making a right turn in from Missouri and a right turn out onto Armacost. The benefit of this plan is it takes cars off the street and it prevents queuing in the residential neighborhood. It would also allow for 1 row of parking along the western edge of the parking lot with 37 parking spaces, which would be enough to accommodate staff and teachers at the school. The interior of the building also provides more than adequate space for both the middle school and the high school, including classroom and common areas. While this is primarily an interior renovation project, the exterior would be redesigned, as can be seen in this rendering, showing the Armacost frontage. While this building has been mostly vacant in recent years, it can easily become the home for a much more intense use with office, retail, or industrial uses where there could be hundreds of employees working long hours. The school use at this site provides a very good buffer between the higher intensity commercial uses and the commercial and light industrial uses and the lower intensity residential uses nearby. The City Planning Commission, which met in this room, heard several hours of testimony and carefully considered this proposal. The Commission voted unanimously to make the required findings and to approve the New West Charter School project. They added dozens of mitigation measures and conditions of approval. And the school has accepted those conditions. We urge you to uphold the Planning Commission action and to deny the appeals. Dr. Sharon Weir is going to present now some additional testimony on our behalf.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address the Planning and Land Use Committee. My name is Sharon Weir, and I'm the principal of New West Charter. In respect of the Plum Committee's jurisdiction, I will limit my brief comments to land use and expansion. I fully understand and respect that the committee members are not involved in any way in a debate about public or charter school choices. As you have heard from New West Charter, we are making a straightforward request to expand our small middle school into a high school, which combined will serve a total of 750 students. Despite much misinformation being circulated, New West is not seeking any space in University High School or indeed any local district facility. In fact, by expanding into the property on Armacost, New West is actually relieving the district of its legal obligation to provide charter schools with local facility space. We sincerely appreciate that although we will be a small 6th through the 12th grade campus, the community has concerns over our relocation. For many months, we have reached out to the local community through the district office of Councilman Rosendahl. We have listened closely to the concerns and comments of the community and have specifically offered above and beyond measures to mitigate any negative impacts of our expansion. Local neighbours requested a reduction in student enrolment, additional traffic mitigation that included busing, specific consideration for entry and exit to the site, and internal physical education space to avoid overuse of a public park. Meeting the demand of such neighbourhood requests are very expensive to implement for any public school. But New West has stepped up to say yes, yes, and yes to all requests. In addition, the neighbourhood asked specifically, what benefit is New West to my community? Once again, New West has offered over 2,000 hours of community support to projects that will specifically benefit West LA, including the local public park at Stonor. Finally, the most significant sought-after community benefit is for admissions for local children into a school with outstanding educational achievements. New West has the longest wait list of any public school in LA. Ever-increasing demand by Los Angeles families for admissions into New West is a reflection of what we do right, which is to provide a high-quality public education for all students who have the opportunity to attend our amazing school. In moving forward, following negotiations with our authoriser and with the support of Councilman Rosendahl, New West will offer a condition-free preference to local students attending Brockton Elementary beginning September 2012. Therefore, as never before, local students who attend Brockton will be able to attend our school and can walk to the site because of the proximity to Armacost. This new preference should ensure not only that those families who might be most impacted by our relocation are given an extraordinary educational opportunity, and it would be hard not to imagine the positive impacts to all the residents on their property values of such a highly sought-after school. In conclusion, New West is a tremendous asset in Los Angeles. By working closely with our local community, we can and will be a positive force for good for kids, neighbours, and the community.
Hello, council members. I'm Jessica Pactaman with Craig Lawson and Company, also representing New West. If you could go back one more slide. One more. Just to show you a visual, this is the reduced enrollment plan that Dr. Ware was referring to. It's a 15% reduction as opposed to the original 875 maximum scenario. And students would be phased in over a period of 3 years, beginning with 575 students on year 1. Next slide. The traffic mitigation plan is something that Dr. Ware also referred to. As part of our traffic mitigation program, what we have offered for the first time is a shuttle bus program. And this is in part to meet the traffic trip caps that DOT has imposed, with 30% of the students being shuttled to and from the site. We would have a mandatory carpool program with 3 kids per vehicle, and then the remainder would be of the students would either walk, bus, or would take transit to the school, depending on their location. The school has offered to provide free transit passes to the students that can walk. And then the after-school program would be a mitigation measure as part of the trip cap reduction. We feel as part of this program that we can meet the aggressive trip caps that DOT has imposed. And we could come back to this more in a little bit. Next slide, please. And this is the recreational plan that would show where the on-site recreational exercise and activity areas have been incorporated. Next. So DOT, as we mentioned, has reviewed and approved the project, concluding that through this aggressive traffic mitigation and monitoring program, once it is fully developed and implemented, would reduce any potential traffic impacts to less than significant level. An aggressive traffic mitigation plan has been identified, which would essentially be controlled by these trip cap levels. It would include the mandatory carpool program, staggered drop-off and pickup times so that we don't have all the high school and middle school students arriving and leaving at the same time, an on-site student loading and unloading requirement so that there's no cars impacting the adjacent neighborhood, free transit passes, as I've mentioned before, and the walking and biking incentives. Next slide, please. We'd also offered up a TDM coordinator that would be on campus. They would they would coordinate these carpool and bus programs based on where the students live and are coming from, and based on which which parents sign up for the appropriate program. They would provide maps to the students who'd be walking and biking, as well as transit ridership information. As an additional mitigation, we're putting in 4-way stop signs at the intersections of Missouri and Armacost and Armacost and LaGrange. That would address a lot of the pedestrian safety and traffic concerns that a lot of neighbors have raised today. And finally, all of these measures would be monitored and enforced on a bi-yearly basis. Normally, DOT does this once a year. We have volunteered twice a year for the first 5 years. So, in other words, based on this phasing plan, DOT would not allow an enrollment increase until these trip caps are met. Next slide, please. We've offered voluntary mitigation measures from day one to address a lot of the neighbors' concerns that would reduce a lot of mitigate a lot of the concerns we've heard, including no student drivers, so no high school students can drive to the site. No one from the school can park on the street. This includes teachers, parents, students who would not be driving, and faculty. We would have adult monitors at each driveway location to facilitate the drop-off and pickup of students smoothly and efficiently so that we have no queuing or backup in the neighborhood. No large-scale events would be allowed on site. Currently, the school uses Beverly Hills High School or Santa Monica High School. They would continue to do this, and the conditions from City Planning Commission reflect this. We would put in the new pedestrian crosswalks to ensure safety. We would be doing the trip cap reviews 2 times a year to allow the increase in enrollment. A crossing guard will be provided at the closest intersection at Armacost in Missouri. We would prohibit student loitering anywhere in front of the school or the neighborhood. And we would have a community relations representative on site who would be able to respond to neighborhood concerns, send out notices to the neighborhood once a year at the beginning of the school year, and really to have a continuous line of communication open with the neighbors. We've mentioned the reverse flow access plan, so I won't mention that again. Next slide, please. There are several myths and facts that are going around, and we've tried to clear these up from day one. But there is a myth that says New West will generate over 1,000 daily trips. This is not true based on the trip cap levels and mitigation plan that we have been required to follow as part of the DOT review. New West will use up street parking in the neighborhood. As I mentioned, as a condition of approval, no parking is allowed in the neighborhood. Schools don't belong in residential neighborhoods. This is not true. As we showed earlier, many schools throughout the city, including LAUSD schools, are located in residential neighborhoods across single-family residential homes. New West students will clog up Stoner Park. New West currently uses Stoner Park at their current location. They walk to the school 1 day a week with a certain number of students at a time. The proposal does not include any more intense use than the current proposal does. Local students won't be allowed to attend New West. Dr. Ware did mention the Brockton Local Preference Program. We'll continue the lottery program. This is a charter school that's public and open to all. However, we are providing preference programs so that more Brockton students can access the site. Next slide, please. The Armacost building isn't big enough for 875 students. This is not true. We heard today that the student ratio, the square footage per ratio in the building is not adequate. Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety has confirmed this. We actually exceed that. We're providing 67 square feet of space per student. This is consistent with several charter schools throughout the city. Other uses here would be more compatible with the neighborhood. This is not true. By right, in this zone, we can have other more intense uses such as office, marketing call centers, where hundreds of employees could be here without mitigation measures controlling the use. There are plenty of other places for New West to go. This is unfortunately not true. New West has been looking for 7 years. They have a budget, and this site can offer a reduced lease that can help them meet the financial needs for the school. New West violates their current carpool program. I know you've heard the concern about current businesses near their location having concerns. The school does not have a CUP program currently. At the Armica site they would, and they would have a strict list of conditions that would govern them. Lastly, the homeschool contracts and traffic mitigation plans cannot be enforced. The school will enforce homeschool contracts. Parents and students and teachers will be required to sign these, and these can go far beyond what the conditions are requiring. I'd like to conclude and introduce Fred Gaines from Gaines and Stacy. I just want to tell you that we believe this is a positive appropriate location as approved by City Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. Fred Gaines of Gaines and Stacy on behalf of New West Charter School. I'm going to be as quick as a lawyer can be on 3 quick legal issues. First of all, I do want to remind the committee that you're here on an appeal of a conditional use permit grant, unanimous grant by the City Planning Commission. Under 1224I, you are to determine whether the City Planning Commission erred or abused their discretion. It's not a substitute of discretion. It's an error or abuse of discretion standard that's in your code for this particular approval. 2, you may have heard or seen in writing that schools are not allowed in the M2 zone, or this is some kind of zone change. Schools are allowed by CUP in the M2 zone. This is an allowed use. I gave a handout where I pulled the code out. The code was changed in 2000 to allow by CUP public schools, elementary and high schools in any zone in the city, and private schools are actually allowed in M zones as well. But this, of course, is a public charter school. So this is a CUP process. It's not a zone change, and it is an allowed use with the conditional use permit as been granted by the City Planning Commission. Finally, you've heard that the MND is not a proper CEQA document in this case. CEQA is not clear on a lot of things. One thing it is clear on is that public controversy is not the basis to require an EIR. It's required when you have unmitigatable significant impacts. In this case, all of your departments have reviewed the information, and even with the higher enrollment count, based on the DOT's normal process of trip counting and going through the mitigations that they've done, this project was found not to have unmitigatable impacts, and the mitigations were there. We have now, as you've heard today, the school has now offered to reduce the number of students, to add a shuttle bus service. They've added a number of additional mitigations. And the fact that you'd have an M&D and then add mitigations, there's actually a specific guideline on this, 15064, statewide CEQA guideline, that talks about changes in conditions which provide additional reduction of impacts do not kick you from an M&D into an EIR. It's exactly the opposite. You're allowed to make those kind of changes. That's what planning commissions and city councils do as these permits go through. They're allowed to add additional mitigations, which has been added in this case, and that does not require that full environmental impact report be done in this case. I'm here to answer any questions you may have on the legal issues, and I appreciate the time you're taking to hear this matter today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Mike McCroskey. I'm an owner of the 1915 Armacross building and represent family members that are owners of that property. Our family's owned that property for over 30 years. Our manufacturing business was in that building. It's been occupied by tenants such as Fox, Advanced Technical Supplies, Candle Computer Corporation. We've had the building on the market for lease. To release it, all portions of the building have become available and created an opportunity for New West School. We'd never considered a school in leasing of that building, and being introduced to the school, did our homework. We met with the school, we met with some of the parents, we met with Bill Seyert, who runs XED, and had an opinion on the school. And we felt very strong as a family as to this school and what it would mean to the community. We're not aware of the reaction that might have happened in the proceedings when the school went for to get the conditional use permit. But I want you to know that our family supports the school, we support the community, we have always had a very positive relationship, and we're invested in the community and in this building. We would not want to have something happen there that we did not feel was positive for the community. I'd just like to add one thought. I live in a West Side community that has 5 schools in it: a high school, public elementary school, 2 private schools, and a nursery school, all within 6 blocks. It adds to the community. It brings vitality to it. They share in a park. This is in the Palisades. And there's no negative amongst the community or the neighbors. It actually brings a positive element to it. So I'm very hopeful that a win-win situation can be created, that there is a collaboration between the school and the community, and the end result will be very positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Birdsong, and I'm the proud parent of 2 straight-A New West students. I'm also the Deputy City Attorney in charge of truancy prevention and prosecution. On a daily basis, I work with schools plagued by truancy, delinquency, recidivism, and schools that lack the parent support to combat these problems. Unlike all of these schools, New West Charter does not have any of these problems. New West Charter has the highest test scores and the longest waiting list of any LAUSD school. And the reason that New West Charter is able to provide a superior, diverse academic environment is because of buy-in. New West has a buy-in of its parents, its students, its teachers, and its administration. Parents and students sign a homeschool contract which requires compliance with several rules and volunteerism. The main reason that Armacost would benefit from this outstanding institution is because, as Dr. Weir stated, over 2,000 volunteer hours performed by New West parents and students would be dedicated to improving this neighborhood. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Isabel Estrada, and I'm a proud student from New West in support of this expansion. I ask you only one question today. Why would you want to stop the creation of the high school that will produce extremely bright and intelligent students? If the request were to be denied, I'd be going to my home school. My home school is Inglewood High School. Inglewood High School will not even begin to give me the opportunities that New West has given me. The field trips to Yosemite, Mountain High, the Museum of Tolerance, and the Science Center, and many other places have given me new knowledge, new friendships, and a brighter future. Without New West, I would not have experienced these things, and I probably wouldn't until I was in college. I came to the school hoping for a better future and the want and need to get out of Inglewood and give myself a chance to become who I want to be. My home school doesn't have the teachers that New West has. I wouldn't be learning at their level for a very long time. I know this because when I first came to New West, I felt so lost because I couldn't fully grasp the curriculum. This was because I didn't learn the same things that they did. Did I really know less than they do? Rejecting and protesting the idea of an amazing high school would put me back at the place where I so desperately wished I would never end up again. The students and faculty help me reach my goals and will always be behind me when I am in need. Now it's my turn to return the favor to help support the idea of a high school. Please help me in my quest for a better and brighter future by supporting us and the New West High School. Gracias. Sí se puede.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey David Sackman, and I am a resident. I live within 2 blocks of the school on Brockton, and since I appear to be the only resident speaking out in favor of the school, I hope you will give me enough time to talk to you and listen to what I have to say.
You have 4 minutes left, though.
Okay, first of all, I came here, by the way, on that public transit that Mr. Casson thinks is too far for the students to walk to, but if an old guy like me can get there, I think the students can get there. What I have to say is I'm sorry to say I'm here to apologize and say I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of the attitude of my neighbors, of the NIMBYist attitude, and I'm disappointed in my councilman, Mr. Rosendahl, who I've looked up to in the past for having the courage to stand up for low-income housing, to stand up for the skate park in our neighborhood, but now he's given in to the crass NIMBYism They're saying that you fully support it. In
So you have
fact,
several speakers behind you as well, you know.
Okay.
You got 3 minutes left.
so I welcome them to our neighborhood. I welcome them to our neighborhood, and first of all, you need to understand what you're deciding here today. There's hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million young people in our city who need to be educated somewhere. They need to go to school, they need to be transported somewhere. The question before you is whether they're going to be allowed into our neighborhood. And right now, they are on a congested street, Pico, a secondary high school, adjacent to a topless bar. So your choice is keep them on a secondary highway adjacent to a topless bar, or allow them to be adjacent to a residential neighborhood. Now, a lot of my neighbors have complained about the traffic. We do have a terrible traffic problem. It's horrible, but this project will not even be a drop in the bucket compared to that. We have not hundreds, but tens of thousands, or maybe hundreds of thousands of cars going up and down Bundy, Santa Monica, Olympic, and Barrington, and crossing through our streets every day. This is not going to affect that, so you need to understand that. So I welcome the school to our neighborhood, even though my son, who's also a teenager, is what my neighbors seem to be afraid of. They're afraid of teenagers, it seems to be. My son is a teenager. He goes to another charter school. If Hawthorne, where my student goes, imposed these same conditions that we're imposing here, he wouldn't be able to go there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Katrina Taylor, and I am the Special Education Coordinator at New West Charter Middle School. It is my privilege to wake up daily at 4 a.m. to take the Metrolink and the Big Blue Bus to be a part of the dynamic team at New West Charter. At New West, special ed students are the responsibility of everyone in the New West community. Each member is committed to providing services and programs that allow special education students to not only access the curriculum, but to succeed in that curriculum. Special ed students are supported through a variety of programs at New West. Through our academic success class, math lab, language lab, and after-school tutoring, special ed students receive small group instruction from the general education teachers as well as myself. All of these different service opportunities allow New West students to access and to feel confident about themselves. I have been privileged to see special ed students leave their comfort zones and speak in front of rooms filled with adults such as yourselves. I have been privileged to see the smiles of students and faces as they've passed that math test or become a member of their peer groups. These successes have all been made possible due to our hands-on approach and small environment. It concerns me to think of setbacks our students could experience returning to a larger environment that does not provide the programs, and most importantly, the commitment of all staff members to see special ed students excel despite their disabilities. With a New West High School, students will have the opportunity to remain in a community which will continue to create a small learning environment with many programs that provide SPED students.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Those are 30 minutes.
Mr. Chair, just asking, are you going to allow others to speak, or what's
Out
your
of
plan?
fairness to the process, we typically go appellant, then applicant, and that's usually it. But Councilman Rosendahl requested to offer more time on each side. So what we'll do is have the appellants 10 minutes to respond, then you'll have 10 minutes, and then we're done. So the appellants, you have 10 minutes to respond to what you heard. Then we'll hear the applicant, and we're done. That's it. Come on up, please. We still have one more item on the agenda other than this one, and my apologies to the last item, but we're ready to start. Let's go.
Gentlemen, this is not a philosophical inquiry that we're engaged in here today. It's not a question of the future of our education in this country versus a few disgruntled homeowners. This is a land use question, plain and simple. Question is, does the proposed change use comply with applicable laws? And the answer is, clearly it doesn't. Furthermore, we're constantly on shifting sands, looking at moving targets with these people. Now they're saying 750 students. Before, there was no possible way they could reduce it from 875. Now they're offering busing. Previously, they said there was no possible way they could afford busing. And yet now they can afford busing by even reducing enrollment. Previously, they said there was no way they could offer additional preferences to the local schools. Now they're saying they can offer some kind of additional preference to the Brockton school. That's a very interesting and telling issue. First of all, it's not part of the record of the CUP. Secondly, I don't know where the legal conclusion comes from that they're allowed to offer this preference. There's no foundation for that. But assuming for a minute that it's true, what it says about the school is very interesting. It's not a change in the law, apparently. They've simply decided they can do it, which means for years they've misrepresented the state of the law. For years they've said we can't do these additional preferences. It demonstrates that also they could have done so in the past and never did. They never reached out to local schools to invite additional minority students, disabled students, English as a second language students. All they did instead was to create what amounts to a private school that's very elite based on taxpayer dollars. Now, in addition, now they say they can have a TDM to monitor traffic, and yet no indication where the money's going to come from that, including a crossing guard also, no indication where the money's going to come from that. They've cried poverty in the past. And furthermore, they're saying 1,000 trips is not true. That's correct. The Department of Transportation said 2,170 trips. That's the number of trips that's involved. Nothing that applicant has presented today vitiates the problems with the project which appellants have described. The size of the student body is still too large for the facility at 750. The traffic impact is still intolerable. The parking impact is still intolerable. Overuse of public facilities and park is still intolerable. There's a negative impact on the quality of life in surrounding residential neighborhood that's still substantial. And still, there's an absence of adequate mitigation and real enforcement measures with teeth. This COP should be denied. Thank you.
My name is Carrie Ike. I'm a teacher at University High School. If this city allows us to go forward, you're sacrificing the investment you're making in our public schools. Specifically, we've made great investments in University High School. We've rebranded and transitioned our comprehensive high school into 4 small schools, a digital media magnet. We created and built a new gym. But because of those investments, our test scores have risen. Our API has gone up 80 points since 2007, making us one of the top most improved high schools in LAUSD. We are not opposed to New West Charter as a school. We are opposed to the location in close proximity to University High School. Public schools are to serve all students regardless of who their parents are. All students who walk in the doors at uni are served. Every graduate, our 430 graduates last year, completed over 17,000 hours of community service. If 500 new students go to this high school, it will result in a loss of revenue of over $2 million, up to 15 teachers, and loss of classes. The more we support programs that aren't representative of LA's unique, diverse population, the more we continue the divide between the disadvantaged and the advantaged.
Hello, gentlemen. Brian Maeda again. As I said previously, I live directly across the street. So I'm giving you my own personal opinion as I see it. And number one, when they say they contacted people in the neighborhood about these meetings, I've never gotten any notice. Nothing. I'm sure that these people here are very talented. They certainly seem that way. Students, however, I've never met any of them, and I've never met any of the faculty. Okay, so they're putting this out there, and I think it's false information. So you know, and as we know on the west side, the congestion is already bad, and it's just going to get humongous if you look at the population they're talking about.
Arthur Casson, I'll be very brief. Mr. Lawson said that the school accepted the City Planning Commission conditions, and then they added buses, which are prohibited by the conditions, and then they talk about having people there after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is prohibited by the conditions. With all the measures they proposed, it still does not mathematically work. Why don't they present numbers to prove the feasibility of their measures, as I proved the opposite? Thank you.
My name is Derek Nardo. I'm a student body president of University High School. University High School supports all the local students that wish to attend and is open to anyone really who wants to attend. All of the students are worried that with New West Charter being so close and us being the nearest local public high school, that New West Charter students would be able to use our facilities. Not just use them, but because they are a charter school, they would receive priority over the students of our own school, and we feel that's not fair to us because we're students of the community, and most New West students who come from outside the community would be given first choice over our facilities, and we feel that's not right. And I would also like to respectfully remind you guys that although the City Planning Commission was unopposed to the charter school, the Neighborhood Council, which represents all of the residents of the neighborhood, was unanimously opposed to the school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Yamida, and I was speaking to a lady who sent her 2 children to a private school who had similar mitigation measures, no student drivers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they went at separate times because they're about 5 years apart. Anyway, she never minded those rules. She drove her kids, dropped them off a few blocks away, told them to walk. When they started driving, she'd let them drive to school. They parked a few blocks away, and then they walked. And she was always afraid of getting busted by the school, so I guess there must have been some sort of penalty. Anyway, last Friday, I went to a meeting with the residents, New West Charter people, and Councilman Rosenthal's staff, and I addressed this kind of question to them, and they were supposed to answer it, but I was reading this report that Craig Lawson's firm submitted, and I really don't see where they address this sort of issue. They address what's adjacent to the property, but not a few blocks away if parents want to drop their kids off on the northeast side of Stoner Park and tell them to walk, or the kids want to park at Stoner Park. So I would like that addressed. Thank you.
Councilman Reyes, specifically to you, I remember some years ago watching you at a city council meeting when you were bemoaning the fact that you had improvements done in low-income parts of your district, and like cleaning up crime and building a park or fixing up the park and building a library, and then the gentrification took place and other people came in and displaced your residents from their own neighborhood because now things were fixed up. That's how I feel about this situation for our neighborhood. We are a very modest part of West Los Angeles. We are not NIMBYs, we are not arrogant, and we are not wealthy people. We have a lot of apartment dwellers, and we have affordable apartments in our area. We have a park that has had improvements because of Quimby funds that came because of the development we've sucked up and the apartments we've lost and all that traffic we have to have. And that park and that high school are of our neighborhood, and we don't get anything out of this deal, and they come in and they're going to use all our facilities and have priority, and that's just wrong.
Real fast, my name is Mark Suzuki. I'm a resident. I live across from the proposed site. My wife came here as an illegal alien from the South American wars. I have 2 foster kids, both are Latinas. And my little girl is 10 years old, and you know what the shame is? She can't go to that school.
My name is Gabby. I'm a student at University High School, and there are already traffic concerns. I commute to school, and Santa Monica Boulevard and Wilshire Boulevard are already really hard to use getting home from school, and it might...
Please finish.
I'm just concerned that the building of a new school will pull resources away from University High School, and it'll be detrimental to the people, the public school students' education. New West Charter is for really school designed for higher performing and higher socioeconomic students, and it'll really be detrimental to the local public schools.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the 10 minutes. Now we are here for the applicants. I'm sorry, folks. Want to keep within the rules, please? The applicants, thank you. Now Councilman Rosen, let's
Just
listen.
1 second.
My comment is only about it's hard to speak up here to the three of you when there aren't three of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's hear from the applicants.
Mr. Chair, again, Craig Lawson for the record. The CUP process is a process. It requires that we submit an application through the planning department, which we did. We have to establish a proposal at that time. It's reviewed by the planning commission. In this case, there was an appeal that allows us, if necessary, to make some changes to the application, to the conditions, in order to meet some of the appellant's concerns, to meet the neighborhood council's concerns. We've done that. We have reduced the enrollment. We've added a shuttle bus program. These are all positive things for the community. We're not trying to subvert the process. We're, in fact, improving the project. We're meeting the needs of the neighborhood. Please keep that in mind as you make your determination. We have some more supporters now, I think, that would like to speak for a few minutes. And thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Baruch. I'm a proud parent of my son Joshua, who goes to New West. You know, this is clearly an issue that's been a bit divisive, but instead of criticizing all of you, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, because you're in a very difficult and challenging position. I also want to thank Bill Rosendahl, because you know what? He's taken a lot of flack from both sides in all of this, and ultimately I don't really know what the outcome's going to be, but on behalf of myself, my family, and my New West family, we want to thank all of you and Councilman Rosendahl. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Paul Grand. I'm a parent at New West. I just want to quickly say thank you very much again for hearing all of this. This is my 5th hearing that I've been to on this matter, and 5th time I've spoken to a different commission related to this. So I'm really excited that we have a chance to be part of this neighborhood. We're really going to embrace the community. This is something, just like Animo Venice, is going to be an opportunity where we can really improve the neighborhood, we can improve the community, we can add to the community, and we really appreciate the help of Councilman Rosendahl and everyone involved. This is going to be a great project, and we're very excited. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Lisa Zimbal. Over 55% of New West students come from West LA, and we expect that there'll be many more kids from the immediate neighborhood coming to our school in the coming years. I'm a Venice resident. I have a son at New West Charter and a daughter at Hamilton High. These are two very different public school choices, and I love both of these schools. To those here who are neighbors of the proposed Armacost site, I understand your apprehension and concern for a high school moving into your neighborhood. I understand that you're worried about noise and traffic and high school kids walking your streets and hanging out on your block. I live very close to where the Animo Venice opened up, 560 high school students, also directly across from residential homes, also right in the middle of our neighborhood. And yes, there were neighbors up in arms feeling the same apprehension that you are feeling right now. And I'm happy to report that Animo Venice has become a thriving part of our community. The kids are smart, dedicated, polite, respectful teenagers. We support them, and they give us a lot of joy too. So while I understand that you are nervous about New West Charter moving in, you know, don't be. You're going to love our kids, and the school is going to add to the life of your neighborhood, not detract from it. What I fail to understand in this process is the LAUSD teachers and Steve Zimmer, a school board member, who are opposing this expansion and somehow feel that New West Charter opening a small high school is going to compete and undermine the education at Uni or Venice High. This fear of competition, this fear of providing other public school options is misguided and short-sighted. We should all be on the same team. We need to be working together, supporting one another, and learning from each other. other. Public education in Los Angeles is in free fall, and the solutions are complicated. Our common goal should be to give the kids of LA as many successful public school options as possible. I volunteer with Superintendent Dacey and the LA Fund for Public Education. If you ask Dacey if he would support the opening of New West Charter High School, he would say yes. He would say public education is in huge trouble. He would say we have to embrace the public schools that work, whether they be public, magnet, charter, or pilot. Embrace them and use LAUSD's ever-dwindling resources to help the schools that don't work and to support the schools that need to work better. This is not a competition. We need to create as many successful public school options as possible. We need to give the kids and families of Los Angeles choices, because education is not a one-size-fits-all.
Ma'am, you have more speakers behind you, you know that, right?
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. My name is Selma. New West is an amazing school that deserves to open a high school. I have never seen teachers with so much dedication to their students. They treat and care about us like a second family. New West is such a spectacular school with an excellent education, a 930 API score to prove it, that it has been confused as a private school various times. When something is as great as New West, you don't want to contain it, you want to expand it. And that's what a high school would do from New West. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jared Hellebuck, a student at New West. I think New West should be expanded because at my lowest they brought hope to my doorstep. This school had such a good reputation that when my mom found out we got into New West, we all started tearing up. The teachers amazed me. They were always glad to help a student. I hear about other schools being awful, but it seems like New West brought hope to every child more so than at many other schools. I have never been a straight-A student, but New West has always made me feel as though I was number one. My grades were not the best at the beginning, but I feel stronger and better about myself every day when I was at New West. And I'm reading more now, so please let New West be expanded so other kids like me who need help should get it from schools like New West. Thank you for your time.
Hi. My name is Erica Schickel. I am a parent at New West. My daughter, Frances, came into the school 2009 straight lottery, number picked out of that plastic Halloween pumpkin. I was at the lottery. I have been at another lottery since. That is how it works. It is not, spaces are not held for overprivileged people. New West is a wonderful school. Our neighborhood school is Laces. Unfortunately, neither of our children can attend that school because it's a magnet. My daughter graduated 2 years ago and went to Hamilton, a substandard school in our experience where fights broke out in the overcrowded classroom. The bathroom smelled of marijuana. We had to remove her from that school because she was not receiving a sufficient education, and she has been to 3 schools so far in high school. Her younger sister, who got in because she is within the 3-year window for siblings, which is standard at many schools, again, not a privilege thing, a standard policy at many schools, is set to graduate this year. We have no place for her to go next year. New West is a positive influence in the community. It is about community. As a parent and a member of this community, I stand up before you and ask you please support this school. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Barry Mayer. Just one quick comment. We're new proud owners of 1629 Armour Cross, 2 blocks north. It's a 16-unit condominium building. We've just come into the area. We've taken all our market research of the people who have come to see the building have a perceived wonderful value and are very much in support of having a wonderful school like New West right down the road from us. Thank you.
Thank you, council members. Doug Freeman, parent at New West Charter now for 6 years with 2 daughters, having gone there. I do want to just encapsulate what's widely available on the internet on the school's website. This is a school open to all. The application process over January, February, and March. 3 open houses that any potential applicants are required to attend. They can pick up an application then. They have then to get the application in by a certain date. They have to come back to verify their application. At that point, they're given a lottery number, and within the next several weeks, that lottery is held. As Ms. Schickel described, it's very much open to the public. It's videotaped. The numbers are put into a big basket, and they're pulled out. Anybody of appropriate age is eligible to go to this school, anybody in the city of Los Angeles. This school is, the people that make it up are of the utmost conscience and character. Anything they say they're going to do, it will happen. It always has. Thank you.
Thank you. At this stage, I want to make sure that it is clear for the record that I will allow 5 minutes just for general public comment. We've allowed well over close to 80 minutes now of perspective and points of view from both sides. But I want to allow at least 5 minutes for general comment on this matter. I'd like to come up and make that statement. Come on up. We'll give 5 minutes for general comment. All of these cards will include for the record to make sure that your presence here is established.
Hi, my name is Judy Johnson,
okay.
and I'm an alumni parent for New West.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Judy Johnson, and I'm an alumni parent. My children aren't eligible to attend the proposed New West High School. In fact, they'll never attend a high school on the west side, my neighborhood. Neither could get into the 3 high-performing public high schools in the area. So now I travel 240 miles a week to get to a school in El Segundo. 240 miles a week of 405 traffic. And that's because there wasn't enough room for all the kids on the west side to attend a quality high school. I understand the neighbors' concern for added traffic and how they'd like to keep their neighborhood as it was 50 years ago when some of them purchased their homes. But we live in a city of almost 10 million people. No neighborhood can retain the characteristics of a half a century ago.
Ma'am, 10 more seconds, we'll give you a minute.
Okay. Everyone must share the burden of progress and population of growth. Please choose the greater good of the students of Los Angeles over the concerns of the neighbors of Armacosta Avenue. Please support New West Charter School.
Thank you, ma'am. Just
My
keep
name
it as
is-
concise as possible, please. Go ahead.
My name is Sam Nichols. I'm not going to go into the traffic. I think that's been beat to death here today. But we've talked about the enforcement of this parent contract, and I still haven't had an answer from the school with regards to how a student can be expelled from school because their parent refuses to carpool. And we haven't had an answer to that. Also, the permit for Stoner Park is 1 day a week. They still haven't answered how they're going to accommodate the recreation for the students for the rest of the days of the week. And right now, that permit is for fewer than, I believe it's around 60 students that they have the permit for. And also, we haven't had a discussion about an EIR yet. That hasn't come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, we're talking about schools, schools, schools. We all want the best school.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can we have someone else that hasn't spoken yet? This public comment.
Excuse me, the clock's
I'm sorry, Madam
ticking,
Attorney.
And you said it was general public?
No, this is not for the applicant, and the appellants have already had an opportunity to speak, and you had ample opportunity to speak. This is for other people, for general public comment, not for either side for this.
Okay.
It's just general comment.
Okay, I appreciate being shut down, and if you just reverse it so you give somebody the 15 seconds or so that I started with, that would be great.
Okay, next.
Mr. Reyes, members of the commission, I think we're back to the situation where we're talking about the intersection where principle meets reality. And the principle that we're talking about is the right of the community, basically, the social contract between the zoning, between the people as reflected in those zoning laws. More importantly, what we're talking about is enforceability. This is a very complicated situation, and I have 2 words for Bill Rosendahl, which is Lincoln Place. We know the whole problem of Lincoln Place, and the tragedy that it created was because the conditions weren't enforced, and the city attorney didn't enforce the no eviction promise. Who's going to enforce all these conditions? I think it's appropriate for Mr. Weezar, Mr. Englander, and you, Mr. Reyes, to ask the city attorney on the record, will the city attorney even enforce any of these conditions, or are we just engaging here in what amounts to one giant bait and switch? Bottom line is, what we're talking about is, this system has to work for the people. These people they have the money, they have the insiders, they got Uncle Harvey, and by the way, I think Mr. Englander should disqualify himself by virtue of his uncles basically being involved in this. And
thank you, sir. Next
thank
speaker.
you.
I live right across the street, and I'm also a resident. And my name is Gretchen Taputo. I live right across the street from the proposed location. And I have spoken with Brockton Elementary. They have 65 children that were eligible last year, and only 2 made it into the school. These are lower income children. This is my community. But what I was really hoping that all 65 of those children would be able to go to this school. But only 2 made it. These are children that are on Title I. That of all the children, only 2 got accepted. I live right across the street, and my own kids cannot be permitted into the school. I have a concern. I want this school to encompass my neighborhood, and that's a diverse population. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Hi, Mr. Reyes. My name is Alejandro Jimenez. I live in 1837 Southwest Gate, just 2 blocks away from these people. They tried to build up this high school. We are against this one because you have to consider 3 points. The neighborhood is all people. They need peaceful, first of all. Second one, you have to consider there is 2 one is high school there, the junior high, and another high school. You have to think in the confrontation. Because they cruise in the students, they cruise in each other's. Sometimes I see. And then it's very unhealthy to these people because they don't have it special to train with the PE, the students. I saw the another day, one of the little guy get injured because they don't have a special field to practice all that one. So they're not allowed to extend that high school there. That's my point.
Thank you very much. Okay, I want to first thank the young people for being here. That concludes the public comment piece. Again, we wanted to afford everyone the opportunity to speak. We want to make sure that everyone that filled out a card will be on the record on this case. And would like to do at this moment, again, thank you very much. So have the staff come on up and give us an overview report on this project. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lucy Barra with the Planning Department. Aside from what was discussed, all I can say is that the City Planning Commission approved this project with a ton of conditions, a lot of which were specially designed for this particular use in light of the protest that was presented by the community. There was just a couple of issues I wanted to clarify for the record. The City Planning Commission did consider a shuttle and bus program for students to attend the school, but the applicant had already offered to provide public transit passes for each of the students, and we thought it would be duplicative of existing transit services, public transit services that could satisfy this issue. We didn't think it was profitable or even helpful or efficient for the school to use shuttling service when there's already public transit services that serve this site. In addition, there's going to be an Expo line stop within walking distance of this site, so we didn't think that was necessary. In terms of recreational facilities, the site already uses Stoner Park. There wouldn't be any increase in intensity of that use. The traffic study, DOT denied the appeal of the traffic study that was prepared for this, and they did 2 analyses based on the 2 different options on the loading on the street or loading on the parking lot so that it was on site. In terms of the applicability of having a public school next to a residential area. As you have seen, a lot of public schools are located in residential areas. I don't think that's anything that's surprising to anyone. But also, if you can recall, several years back, there was an industrial land use policy study that was undertaken by the department, and it did an inventory of all the industrial uses in the city, and this particular area was identified as one of the areas where existing industrial land uses could be potentially changed to non-industrial use based on circumstances such as adjacent land uses, and this particular site being next to a single-family residence made it one of those characteristics. The transit management plan was incorporated.
So for just clarity, the change in use here would not be precedent setting because of the trends already occurring in the area? Am I hearing you correctly?
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
Given the
characteristics of the community?
Right, and changes that are being proposed on this site, are there other sites that are already going to change, or would these be the
Well,
first
the
one?
industrial land use policy, the study that was done was just to take an inventory of the uses. It was under the mayor's directive to determine which land uses were appropriate for industrial use and which were not, and that was based on the determination that maybe we were losing jobs or opportunities for new businesses to come in because of the adaptive reuse that was going on, where you're converting industrial uses to residential uses. So that study was meant to kind of cover what the inventory was and determine which sites were more amenable to changes from industrial to non-industrial uses.
Okay, thank you.
The transit management plan and the DOT mitigation measures were incorporated into the conditions of approval, and those were also approved by the City Planning Commission without any discussion. And, you know, I think it's important to repeat here that we have no jurisdiction over the way the school operates, how they do their enrollment, or any of their homeschool contracts. We have no ability to monitor that as a land use issue, and that we just have to, you know, that condition for a homeschool contract isn't something that we can enforce. And there's a plan approval that was incorporated into the document as well that required a review every year. So as enrollment increases, we have the opportunity to determine whether they're in compliance with the conditions.
So the commission, when they approved this project, there was a certain number in terms of enrollment, correct?
Right. Initially, they approved at the 875 students.
And so what's the number now?
They've reduced that to 750.
Okay. And so the impact based on that decreased number of enrollees was factored in the most current analysis and how the mitigation was being defined?
Actually, the most current analysis from DOT reflected the 875 students. So any mitigations that you're looking at now in the document is reflective of those 875 student enrollment.
So my assumptions are that the conditions that are being defined on the 870 will remain, or will they change given the change in number of enrollment?
Those conditions are remaining the same, irrespective of the reduction in student enrollment.
Okay. Okay. Colleagues, any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a few. Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank all the parties here on both sides of this, on this issue. It is extremely difficult to cite a church, a synagogue, a prison, a homeless shelter, or a school in a community. And I think communities need certain things, not all on that list. And this, looking at the map, certainly has a lot of schools and other benefits and community benefits in the community. I also want to share with you that I absolutely oppose, and I always have, across the board, converting an M-zone property to a school. And I want to put that on the record because I've made a lot of public statements about that before I was on the city council, as the chief of staff, in my former capacity, and now as a council member. And I'm opposed to that. I think there are very rare exceptions, and we've got to be extremely careful on that as well. And the exceptions are critically important that we listen to those. And one, in first looking at the industrial land use study that was completed to look at if it makes sense, if it truly reflects the changes of a community, because the second you give up an M-zone property, you lose it forever. And when that happens, you don't have a place for people to work, they're going to have to commute. And that's a real problem. I'm not in support, quite frankly, of LAMC section 12.24, I'm opposed to that. I didn't have a vote on that. That was done many years ago, and 12 years ago exactly. And that amended the ordinance that allowed schools to be placed on M-zone properties. If this were a zone change, it would be automatic. I would have no questions. I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd walk in at the end, and I'd vote no. But it's a conditional use, not a zone change, and so it becomes a lot more technical and complicated. With that, I also do want to compliment my colleague, Councilman Bill Rosendahl, because this has been a contentious issue, and I will tell you, whatever the outcome, and I believe, and I've got a lot of questions I want to get into, but whatever the outcome is, this is a leader who has taken the time to go out and listen to so many different constituencies, to try to take it all into consideration, to negotiate conditions, and I also feel that at the end of any local land use issue, it's incumbent, the council member of that district carries a lot of weight with me in whatever their decision is. That doesn't mean that I vote up or down to whatever they say, but they carry a lot of weight because they are the elected representative of that district. And so that is critically important. With that, I do have some questions. First and foremost, the issue going on to the 55 on-site parking. I heard a comment earlier, one of the opponents suggested that that would be eliminated down to 37 because of the drop-off and pickup of the buses going in and out. And that has not been addressed. I haven't heard that addressed. So is it 55 or is it down to 37 to make room? And is there room for the buses to come in if that's fully parked with 55?
The 55 on-site parking spaces, those are the existing surface parking spaces. The code doesn't specifically address the required parking ratio for high schools. It does address for elementary schools for some reason, and that ratio is 1 parking space per classroom. In this case, the I think at the time prior to the changes, it was like 20-something classrooms. Is that right? 28 classrooms. So on that basis, they would be required 28 parking spaces. So the on-site and off-site, the on-site loading would take place on the parking lot prior to the commencement of classes, and after the classes are over. The 37 parking spaces would exceed the 28 minimum based on the ratio that's addressed in the code.
Well, that might be in the code, but I'm reading the conditions of approval, which might go over and above the code, and I think some of the conditions are, quite frankly, too soft, and there needs to be some clarity on this. So going back to, I understand the code, and it leads to another question of, and I didn't see it in here anywhere, do you know how many students there are per classroom?
How many students per
classroom? How many
classroom?
students per classroom? I haven't heard that.
I don't know offhand.
Does anybody have a quick answer?
Okay.
Just a quick answer of how many students per classroom.
The architect.
25 students per classroom?
Excuse me, she should come up to
Can you come up to the mic
microphone.
real quick then, please?
Come on up and give us your name, please.
So we can hear it on the record.
For the record.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Wayne. I'm the architect of New West Charter. Just quickly, regarding the parking situation, what Lucy is saying is that the 37 space is during the drop-off and pickup area. Drop-off and pickup time. Other time, the 55 space will be available. And on top of that, the parking requirement we already confirmed with building and safety. We meet all the parking requirements.
Well, and again, and I appreciate that, and that's what I was trying to figure out. So if you had 25 students per classroom and 750 students, that would be roughly 30 teachers, plus the faculty, the staff. I'm assuming there's going to be an on-site nurse. The halftime, you had 4 physical, if I recall this from just reading all the documents, 4 part-time physical education teachers. Let's assume they're all there at the same time. And then you had, it was mentioned there was 2,000 volunteer hours by parents. I'm assuming the parents would have a place to park as well. So I'm trying to figure out just that alone without even getting into the student parking, which I've got some questions on. Far exceed, that's more than 55.
Okay, the way parking requirement works is there is a particular municipal code and building code address that. For middle school, the parking requirement is 1 parking per classroom. For high school, it's one parking space for per 500 square feet of the classroom area. And because this building itself is an existing building, is a light industrial warehouse facility. It has 1 per 500 parking requirement as it is. So the building already have a non-conforming parking right. It's typically what we call grandfather status for parking. So moving into this building, LADBS already confirmed we inherited that non-conforming right for parking.
Yeah, no, I get that. And so that was my concern. And so the condition then, it's being conditioned that you have a minimum of 55 on site. And so I wanted to go back and reconfirm that at a minimum, that's because I've heard the statement made with the buses, there's no way you can have 55 in the design. And so I understand what the building code is. I understand that you have a non-conforming use, and I get all that. What I'm asking, though, is under the conditions, what's going to be required that you always maintain?
55.
55.
And to address that quickly, that only happened in the duration of 20 or 30 minutes of drop-off and pick-up. After that traffic is clear, it go back to 55.
Okay. The other question was on enforcement on some of these issues, and I wasn't quite sure what the enforcement arm is of the City of Los Angeles, not so much the contract with the parents and not the contract with the students, but one of the things here, and I realize this is always an issue, particularly of high schools, because in 10th grade at 16 years old, you get your driver's license in a car and you can drive to school. And that's the first thing a 16-year-old wants to do. There's no way that a 16-year-old with a car, that has a car or access to a vehicle, that has a driver's license, that has a bus pass is actually going to get on the bus. They're going to drive to school. And so if these are, no, trust me, you don't want to applaud that. My daughter turned 16 yesterday. She's on the road, so nobody's safe anymore. You don't want to applaud that, but I'm speaking from experience. And so, with all kidding aside, though, it says here that they will not be allowed to park on a city street, and I'm trying to figure out what legal enforcement the city has to say that. And I'm a police officer as well. I can't write a citation, a ticket, for a student that parks on a city vehicle unless it's a PPD, which is preferential parking district. Does this area in the residential community around it have a PPD? Do we know? No? So is there an enforcement part to that outside of the school contract with the parents? And anybody from the school, can they speak on that? Is there any type of enforcement that can be made from the City of Los Angeles into that?
Councilman, again, Craig Lawson for the record. Let me first state that there are a number of parking restrictions in this community. There is not a preferential parking district. However, there's no parking on part of Armacost, and there's 2-hour parking in the immediate area. So there's already restrictions in place for parking right next to the school. In terms of enforcement, the homeschool contract is the best enforcement mechanism that the school has because, again, it's something that is enforced. It's very clear. It's currently enforced, and it's something that will continue to be. We have offered up to the neighborhood the opportunity to where the school would support a preferential parking district in the area. They have said no, they're not interested in that. Okay. It is true, and we would continue to offer that we could support a preferential parking district in the area. We're happy to do that, but we had received no positive feedback on that.
Okay, on sporting activities, it says here that on sporting activities, and they're going to have 4 coaches or part-time coaches. Where are these sporting activities going to occur? It mentions the park, the local park, once a week for part of the school, but there's nowhere where it mentions the rest of the students and any other local facilities.
We have a chart showing locations of all the sporting activities. It was one of the exhibits in our letter. There's a number of nearby locations where they do sports.
Okay, do you have contracts with those other locations yet?
Some of them are already in place and will continue because of the existing use of the school. Others are would have to be arranged as soon as the school was able to obtain this location.
Okay. I mean, that's one thing I would like to see is at least some kind of, at a minimum, prior to opening a school for 750 students, that those are secured contracts.
Absolutely.
in place.
Exhibit G in our letter indicates that those locations.
Okay. My other concern here was under hours of operation, number 5, number D, where it says activities outside normal school hours, including an open house. And then it goes on to say parent-teacher conferences, school meetings, and other customary school activities shall be scheduled so as to adequately provide parking on-site for all staff and visitors. How do you have, I'm just not even sure how to read into this. How do you have an open house for all parents and they park on-site in 55 parking spaces?
Hi, Jessica Pactaman for the record. There will be no open houses on site. They're currently at Santa Monica High School, and they'll continue to operate that way.
Can you look at condition 5 under hours of operation, conditions of approval, number D?
So sorry, can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Can you please look at
Yes, I'm looking at
number
condition
5,
5D. Yes.
hours of operation, number D?
Yes.
It says activities outside normal school hours, including open house, parent-teacher conferences, school meetings, and other customary school activities shall be scheduled as to adequately provide parking on-site for all staff and visitors.
Correct.
You just made a statement that you're not going to have any open houses on-site.
Yes, that's correct. There will be no open houses on site. Lucy maybe can help me here, but I believe the intent of this condition was to allow the other activities that happen on a site and.
Mr. English, can I just add a comment? So we, this year, made a decision to remove our open houses from New West because the demand was overwhelming. This year alone, in 2 open houses, we've had 2,500 people turn up. There's no way any site could cope with that. And we have a written agreement with Santa Monica High School to allow us to have our open houses there and have plenty of parking. And
I appreciate that, and I think the community will as well. The question, the concern, though, is that's not what the condition says. So we need to
then we'll modify the condition to reflect that.
Okay, thank you.
But just so that it's clear, these other parent-teacher conferences and things of that nature are scheduled so that not all parent arrives at the same time at the site.
Yeah, I see that under events on number
Okay.
7. Yeah, thank you for that. I had a question on 13, site access and internal circulation on the crossing guards. Was there other intersections that were going to require? It only mentioned the one that we're going to have a crossing guard, and also my question on that, it doesn't mention if that's prior to school or after school, if it only is at one time in the day, or is it going to include both? And if we can have that amended to clarify whether the crossing guard will actually be there in the morning and then when school
These
gets
were mitigation measures presented. These are mitigation measures that were implemented as a result of DOT's analysis, and we can clarify that to reflect both morning and afternoon use.
Okay. My other question on the mandatory carpooling of 3 students, how is that enforced outside of the contract with the parent? Is there any other type of enforcement other than the contract with the parents and the school?
There's a monitoring program which is occurring twice a year. There's a traffic engineer that would be reviewing the number of cars coming to the site and also the number of students that are in each car.
Is this an independent one or one hired by the school?
It's an independent traffic engineer. Typically, the school ends up paying for it because there's no other way that it's going to work, but it is an independent traffic engineer who's doing this because he's licensed by the state, and DOT has established that program for independent review.
And they come out and spot check it twice a year. Can I ask that one of the conditions be that they come out randomly without notification?
That's typically
one
how
of those 2?
Right.
If we could write
typically
that in there.
That's how it works. Is
Typically,
that they come out,
but not always.
Well,
okay, yeah.
In my experience, they come out without warning.
Right. Okay.
There's specified months that they're supposed to come out. I think it's November and April. But they would come out without warning. And again, they're taking counts of the number of cars for both students, for teachers. Everyone gets counted.
Right. Okay.
And
Those were my primary concerns. I wanted to hear from from Mr. Rosendahl is anxious to hear from him as well.
Just to clarify, that trip review is done twice a year, and it's specified in the conditions that it occurs November and April, but if you want to remove that schedule...
I'd rather
so
remove
that
the schedule and have it
so
done
that
at
they're not
random.
aware, okay.
Yeah, if that's possible, that would be great. And then I think I had one last thing, but we'll go ahead and I'd rather yield my time to the councilman of the district.
Okay, it's, before we do that, Councilmember Huizar?
Just a couple of questions. The CUP will be up for renewal or review in 1 year?
The plan approval condition requires a one-year review.
What's the typical case? We do
For
how many
schools,
years?
it's typically 2 years just because they tend to be controversial. If they're established schools, sometimes it can be up to 5 years.
Okay. And on the pickup drop-off area, do we have recommended path for the students, for the drivers, the cars to do the pickup and drop-off, or we just say this is your pickup and drop-off? We don't have
No,
any
the
direction?
site plan, if I think it's in one of the exhibits in the letter that was printed to you by the applicant, the loading is directed by a person at the ingress at the driveway, and they're queued in, I believe, in two lanes. And then there's a drop-off area towards the end of the building on the other side.
And those directions, or the directions as to how to get to the ingress and egress, is it a couple of blocks away that a recommended path to the school? Because we're going to see the immediate impact there at the school, but when parents are taking different way to that area, it may create some problems.
Jessica Pactman, that's a good question. If you refer to Exhibit C in the Craig Lawson booklet, you can see the access plan of where cars would enter and exit. Okay. The access plan would be outlined in the home schools contracts that schools will require parents and students and teachers to sign. So that's how they would know what route they can enter and exit.
Gotcha. Okay. And on this sheet here, there's an attrition, well, not the numbers, but the attrition levels, let's say, for example, the sixth grade, by the time they graduate, there's about a decrease of about 61 students. What are those numbers based on? How did these numbers, how did you
The
come up with these?
California Department of Education's requirements.
They actually provided us advice on the level of attrition, and those numbers are based on their advice on attrition with all of the charter schools.
And these are state numbers?
These are numbers from CDE, yes.
Okay, thank you. And finally, I recognize that our jurisdiction is not the, whether there's some value in the charter school or not, but, I mean, our purview is more land use and the impacts to local communities, et cetera. But if someone again could explain to me, 100% of the students are taken in by lottery? Can you speak to the microphone, please?
So that's a charter law. Any charter school must do
100% of the students are taken by lottery. And how has that in practice come out? Where are the students coming from?
So from right now we have most of the kids from West LA, over 60% come from West LA, but we also have kids from other zip codes, and we have kids coming in from about 40 different zip codes. Yeah.
The charter law is a little more complicated. I don't know, do you want to hear another
Sorry.
charter law?
No, it's okay. Yeah. I got it. Thank you.
Half of the kids do come from...
Okay, while I'm speaking to the microphone, please.
Yeah, just, there are statistics that they've shared with us to say that of the, I think they've had typically about 110, 115 openings in sixth grade, and they've shared with us that half of those students come from their exemptions, which are siblings, or in the past it's been founders, now it's not founders because they don't have many more founders who have kids, or staff, children of staff. I think those are the three ways you can get in on an exemption. Also, if you donate hours working for the school, promoting the school, there are 10 exemptions like that. So all those people are not lotteried in, they have exemptions, and the other ones get in by lottery. That's the way state
law works.
Just to clarify that and I'll move on. Yeah, thank you.
Just, I can give you the accurate facts there. New West brought in this year, there was 110 kids came in the 6th grade. 120. Of those 120, only 20 came in from the sibling preference, 0 came in from employees, and 0 came in from the pre-entry volunteers. All of our kids this year came in from siblings, and with 2 kids that came in under SB 740.
So not out. So it's 100% and not by lottery.
It's those kids all the names go into the lottery, but there are preferences before they get to the lottery, right? But it's the vast majority of our lottery.
Okay, but every year you're going to have, let's say you have 100 spots, you're going to take up some way your sibling exemption, etc. It's not going to be 100% by lottery, correct?
Well, the exemption, the kids all apply the same way, but they have to then, these preferences then stand because they're allowed by state law, but the vast majority of those kids go into that purple pumpkin that they told you about.
Okay, thank you. I served on the Board of Education prior to being on the school board, and this was at a time when the school district was really struggling on its role with charter schools, and I supported the role of charter schools in public education because of the alternatives it could provide, the innovation, and that we could learn from one another as to what works and what doesn't work in the classroom. I know that's not before us, but I do think that there is some merit in having charter schools be near other public schools. What we have to, and what I looked at as a school board member were things as obviously the academics, whether the no creaming, that we weren't creaming from the local students and only taking the best students from a local area, that is of a lot of concern. I don't think that was the purpose of to why charter schools were created. So I know that's not under this purview, but there are some issues that were brought up with respect to equity and access. And I would hope just that, as a side note, that the school does take a look at those and take them seriously. I think the whole charter school movement has a lot of promise, but if we, in a few occasions, start to not provide that equity that we guarantee in public education, it could screw up the whole charter school movement. And I think those are some issues we really need to look at. But with that, I don't have any other questions. My decision here is based solely upon whether I believe the CUP will be properly granted or not.
Thank you, Councilmember. But several points have been brought up, and I do want to make sure Councilmember Rosenthal has his opportunity to speak to the community here, given his letter that we received. But there's a statement you made at the beginning, Ms. Valk, in terms of our role in land use. Yet part of the letter states that there is a legally binding agreement that has a guarantee that the Brockton Elementary School has first option to attend New West. Now, will that be part of a parallel document, or will it be part of the conditions? How have we, and maybe you can help me with the principal, how are we going to ensure that the process that's been legally stated here as a guarantee to the graduates of Brockton Elementary School, what mechanism do we have for enforcement there?
So we have just very recently drafted a resolution that included that Brockton kids would have a preference in our lottery. We've removed all of the conditions about SB 740, so therefore it doesn't matter if Brockton has a free and reduced lunch population or not. We are saying that Brockton students can come into New West. We're drafting a legally binding resolution which will be signed by our board over the next couple of days, presented back to the community, but that will go into effect for this school year.
So these will be parallel documents?
Yes.
What would be the mechanism? I'll make sure it's for the record.
For any charter school, you go through Brown Act, and any of the resolutions are through a proper board meeting. So we have, which is open to the public, and people come and can make public comment, and then the board members do vote on that resolution.
Okay.
Can I ask one question on that?
Sure.
Just open up another question. I mean, what's great about resolutions is they can be voted out by the next board. And so is there a way to add those resolutions, whatever they might be, that are presented either from this meeting or from Councilman Rosendahl, or whatever ideas, if that's the direction it goes in?
Yes.
Or whatever you guys have accepted to, as part of the conditions that we could be recorded into the document with the city?
I would just ask if the city attorney can clarify whether we can enforce through land use policy a third-party agreement.
This is a land use approval,
That's right.
so you can impose any conditions where there's a nexus to the impact caused by the proposed entitlement, and anything else isn't enforceable under this CUP. So it looks like there's I'm not familiar with the policies and practices, but it looks like the charter school has a different role with the board, and that's where this would get. I don't know if it's their charter that gets affected if they don't comply with the conditions, but it's something between the school and the board.
I see. Okay, thank you.
But it is up to the council of the district. If that is an understanding he has, he can put that in writing, and hopefully there's a mechanism to follow up.
I just want everyone to be clear, so no one gets disappointed later, that doesn't. If it's not a land use condition, it's not dealing with a mitigation, it's not a nexus, it's not enforceable by the city under this CUP if it's granted.
Okay, thank you. So, do you want to add to that, Mr. Gaines?
What we would expect to happen if that condition was included is that we would file the master covenant. So we would record against the property that in order to operate the school there, we need to meet all of these conditions.
Okay.
We have a 1-year and a 5-year plan approval. One of the things that happens during that is we have to go through every condition and show how we're meeting those conditions, and that's where we would present a copy of whatever the documentation was for that condition. So that's how this would be enforced in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much. Councilman Rosendahl, I believe we provided as much discussion. We tried to get to the facts, and we provided both sides ample time. And I believe you'd like to make your comments and perhaps review the letter you submitted.
Thank you very much, Chair and members of the committee, and I appreciate the thoroughness of your questions, and I appreciate communities of every side of the issue being here today to make the democracy work. During this process, and frankly for me, it was going on all the way until even as this meeting was going on. Over the weekend, it became very clear to me as I do my homework. I've spoken to dozens of neighborhood folks. I've been to meetings in the community. I've spoken to dozens of kids and parents who are in the school and who aren't in the school. Many of you know that for me to come to a decision on anything, I try to take as much input as I can, and then I try to do what I think is right and fair. And I play that all the way to the moment of my vote so that I'm able to continue to stay open. And I'd like to, for the record, say a few things. First of all, as I was trying to figure out how do I make this a legitimate local school opportunity for local people. And obviously Brockton is a local school. It's an LAUSD school. And I talked to a fellow by the name of Ted Mitchell. And Ted Mitchell used to be the head of Occidental College, and then he went on to be on the board of the California State Board of Education, which manages state direct charters. And I'll read a letter that he gave me this morning. We're on the phone at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, talking about what this letter would look like. And here's what he says. This agreement, which will provide the option of any Brockton Elementary School graduate to attend New West, is a model for collaboration between high-performing charter schools and their local neighborhood school. Specifically, New West has given up certain rights stipulated in their charter in order to guarantee that Brockton students automatically have the option to attend New West going forward. What that means is Brockton families that now have special high-quality middle and high school options accessible to them in their neighborhood. And then he says, for his own background, as a national funder of high-quality charter organizations at new schools, which is his outfit that he runs, it's a venture fund, and in that capacity, he said, as a former member of the authorizing body, the California State Board of Education for New West, I can say without hesitation that the New West Brockton Agreement is a game changer and a win-win for the community. New West and the school district, I encourage you and your colleagues to use this framework as a way to encourage more high-quality charter schools becoming the neighborhood school for children in Los Angeles. I also spoke to John Deasy, the superintendent of schools of the LAUSD, and I think he's doing an incredible job. And I explained to him how Brockton would automatic those graduates be part of the enrollment class. And he said, Bill, that is a game changer. He said, that is exactly how charter schools should operate. I told him that there were suspicions in the past, and some people had anecdotal stories in the past, that this charter, as well as many other charters, and they do their lottery, certain requirements and hoops to jump through do impact the middle class and the working class, but not necessarily everybody, and therefore maybe the lottery is not a cross-section across board. And when I mentioned to the superintendent of schools that this will be in writing and binding, he said, that looks terrific. And then I said to New West, take a look at Pali High in the Palisades, which is a magnet school that operates that way. And when I said that, it became very clear to New West Charter that they would do this. Who gets admitted to New West? 1, siblings of previous students who have graduated, at least 2 prior in the last 2 years. Children of employees at the school. Children of pre-entry volunteers, and that's the maximum of 10 local spots. Graduating students applying for Brockton Elementary. Graduating students applying from Brockman Elementary. Anyone else who applies through the lottery for the number of spots left in the lottery. I then wrote a letter, and I circulated it around the room before and then I rewrote it, and this is what my suggestion colleagues, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Weezer, and Mr. Englander is. In response to the considerable efforts made in recent days, especially in the last 2 weeks, the school's proposal has improved significantly, making it a much better fit for the neighborhood and a much stronger academic asset for the community, the enrollment policy. For this school to adequately suit the neighborhood, it is vital that the school's population include the children of families that live nearby. I'm pleased that the school has agreed to sign a legally binding agreement, and I expect our city attorneys to help it be legally binding agreement that guarantees that any graduate of Brockton Elementary School has first option to attend New West. This is a model for collaboration between high-performing schools and locals. And parents, volunteers do not have to be part of this. If a parent is working, and this came from Sochi just a few minutes ago, has a job or 2 or 3 and can't afford to volunteer, there wouldn't be a requirement. But I do know for a fact that when parents get a chance to volunteer and to participate, they love the experience because there's nothing better than volunteering and being part of your child's upbringing. But knowing that if you can't do it, that is not a penalization, that is in no way a negative reflection on you, because obviously you have to put food on the table first. But that does give people an opportunity to feel even more participation, and that is family in doing that. Reduction in maximum enrollment. Look, I said no to 875. It just was beyond my ability to appreciate. Even when I went over there in an open house and saw the brick building, I raised the issue of the fact that that just didn't work for me. Though I know a lot of schools, especially charters, are sometimes orphans in one sense and they have to fight for space. But on the other hand, if the charter is open and the immediate neighbors' kids are involved, then it becomes less of a grab of some elitist strategy that others have said might have been the past or anecdotally part of the story. So the reduction in the maximum enrollment. In response to the concerns about density expressed by me and by neighborhood residents, New West Charter has reduced their proposed maximum to 750, and that's a reduction of 125 students from the initial proposal of 875. That means the amount of square footage per student is 66.5 square feet, in common with other charter schools in adaptive reuse projects. The traffic mitigation, I have Jaime here, the head of the department, and he is assuring me that whatever part of this that needs a binding commitment and follow-up, his department will do. Just stand up so they can see who you are in the room here. He runs the Department of Transportation here in the city. The school will provide a minimum of 4 buses, each carrying 57 students, to access the school site every morning and every afternoon. The school will identify and secure off-site parking lot locations prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or temporary certificate of occupancy when picking and dropping off students would occur. I'm counting on the department to be working with the city attorney's office and my office to codify this so that this will be clear. And if there are penalties associated with not doing it, those penalties will be enforced. When it comes to recreational space, I also really have a problem with the fact, I grew up, I was fortunate enough I could open the windows and see the trees and go in the backyard, but I'm afraid on the west side, land is so valuable and so scarce that it's difficult to do that. But with the reduction in enrollment, the indoor exercise space has increased to approximately 5,770 square feet. The interior activity areas remain the same at approximately 9,600 square feet. Through the use of these indoor spaces, the school needs to utilize off-site recreational facilities will be reduced. The classrooms will include circuit training, tumbling and floor exercise, gymnastics, and classes on nutrition and fitness. New West will continue to offer an off-site recreation program. The middle school will use Stoner Park on only 1 day a week per school student, will not be using Stoner Park for school programming. It's clear the amount of students and the times that they will be using it. With these recent changes and concessions in mind, I recommend you approve this application for the conditional use permit for New Charter West with the following stipulations. 1, that the enrollment cap be limited to a maximum forevermore of 750. Enrollment will start at 575 in 2012-13, grow to 680 in 2013-14, and reach its cap in the year 2014-15. This use and development of the property shall be in conformance with plot plan dated January 15, 2012, which incorporates 5 exercise rooms, totaling of 5,770 square feet. 3, the prior issuance of a certificate of occupancy or temporary certificate of occupancy. The New West Board of Directors have approved a legal binding resolution, and we're going to make sure the city attorney sees that it's legal binding, an agreement stipulating that any student who graduates from Brockton Elementary School, regardless of when the student enrolled in the school, said shall be guaranteed admission to New West Charter School regardless of the Title I status of Brockton Elementary School. They will stay that way forever as long as this school sits on Amicus in our community there in West LA. 4, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or temporary certificate of occupancy, New West Charter School shall submit, and the Department of Transportation shall approve for the new shuttle bus program, public transit incentives, and assistance for students to travel to and from school by bike or foot. A determination from DOT, that's the Department of Transportation, that the school is in compliance with the TEMP, that's TMMP, shall be required before annual enrollment increases from year 1 through that period of year 5. This will not happen without verifying this in that. And my last paragraph on this is point 5. The New West shall agree to enforce a prohibition on student loitering in the neighborhood as mandated commitment to its student-parent agreement with school. that prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy or temporary certificate of occupancy, New West Charter School shall submit to the Department of Planning and the local council office an itemized breakdown of physical education, sports, and after-school programs with location and times, and sign contracts and permit for physical education, sports, and after-school programs will accommodate for each and every student. And there will be those meetings, there will be those sign-offs, they will be codified before anything happens. This New West Charter School shall be required to submit the documentation of recreational space and programs to the Department of Planning and the local council office on an annual basis, so we can monitor this annually. That New West, item number 8, Charter School agree to the other provisions outlined in the February 28, 2012 letter that Craig Lawson signed on behalf of New West School. To assure that the neighborhood interests are protected, it is imperative that New West secure all necessary approvals, signs all required documents, and fulfills all mitigation and conditions before issuance of a certificate of occupancy or temporary certificate of occupancy. In other words, you can't go in there unless they do what we're telling them to do. With these concessions and requirements in place and vigorously monitored and enforced, I am confident this project will contribute positively to the immediate neighborhood, the West Los Angeles community, and the academic enrichment of the next generation of Angelenos. Thank you for your hard work and consideration of this matter.
Thank you, Councilor. So, colleagues, in light of the recommendation by Councilor Rosendahl, and Madam City Attorney, maybe you might want to help here, but let me give it a shot here. We could grant in part, deny in part. The appeals filed by Suzanne Fisher, Tina Michelle Grin, Mark Suzuki, Brian Tadashi Maeda, Timothy Dellinger, and Charles Sims relative to the determination of the Planning Commission in approving a conditional use permit to allow the operation of a charter school in M2-1 for the proposed conversion of an existing one-story structure into a school with modified conditions. And that will capture the essence of all of these different, and we would have to prepare revised findings on this matter. Do I have a second on that action?
You got a second.
Second? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that is majority, and that will be the action of this committee on this item.
That will include Mr. Rosenthal's
All
conditions?
all of Mr. Rosenthal's conditions have been included in that umbrella statement, and we will have those conditions given to the staff, and they'll be included in the report. Will be prepared before council, and again with the revised findings. So that'll be the action of this committee. Okay, I do know number 4. I want to apologize. Item number 4, folks that were here on District 2. But my understanding is that we will continue that item to another date.
Okay.
Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so anybody here for public comment?
No.
Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.